3 minutes after 10, 2 weeks tomorrow. I nearly started the other way around then. That's why there was a weird pause. I nearly started by saying 2 weeks tomorrow is the election, but then I thought, no, I should start with you don't care, do you? You're not remotely interested in any of this. This is my internal dialogue now being broadcast live to the nation, or a small part of it. How lazy would it be? How lazy would it sound if I said that I want to canvass you for interesting questions to ask specifically about the sort of general election run-in? I don't think it's lazy, because I just think sometimes that we might have missed something. I find myself circling very similar territory every day, perhaps inevitably, because you're responding almost to the same news every day. But I wonder whether you've got... So do feel free today to keep an eye on the news agenda and come up with questions that we could ask tomorrow or possibly later today. What is the political phone-in you haven't heard but you would like to hear? Shall I wait? Shall I wait? I'll just wait. I'm not going to get any, am I? Nothing yet. Thank you, Anne. Anne writes, rarely I agree with James O'Brien, but he puts his finger on the problem with Mr Sunak. He comes across as a robot. How can you rarely agree with me? Rarely disagree with me, Anne? I've been right about almost everything for the last 8 years. Good Lord. I want to know why, listening to Rishi Sunak, and I don't know whether you heard the interview with him today, with Nick, or whether or not... you've just sort of formed an opinion of him from other encounters, other interviews, other appearances. Maureen hasn't. Maureen's been in touch to say, what a stupid question. How can any of your listeners know the character of Mr Sunak when they have never met him? Well, that really just closes off almost every phone-in topic that we could do in the run-up to the general election. You've never met me either, Maureen, but I bet you have a strong opinion about... You see, you have met Rishi Sunak. That's the whole point of election campaigns. They are opportunities to meet the people. They're certainly the whole point of Starmer and Sunak coming into this studio to answer Nick's questions. It is an opportunity to meet the people. And I don't think I've ever met him, actually. It's in terms of face-to-face. I've met Starmer, but not Sunak. So I found myself listening today, and I've watched him quite closely as well at PMQs and in other encounters, other contexts. And I can't quite pinpoint what his problem is. I can't quite see what's wrong with him. I just want to say for the record, I'm categorically not flirting with the idea of feeling sorry for him anymore. And I also want to probably spear quite early the Suella Braverman observation. The decision to reappoint Suella Braverman to the Home Office was the point at which any hopes of Rishi Sunak proving to be made of slightly better stuff than either of his predecessors disappeared immediately. I get that, and I kind of agree a bit as well, but I don't know how helpful it is to keep circling that territory. But if you were to assemble a politician from algorithms, or you to get a computer program, to be a conservative leader, you could do a lot worse than this fella on paper, couldn't you? He's made a ton of money and he's married well. I mean, they were once great conservative achievements. They were great conservative values. He's from an ethnic minority, so the modern nature of the United Kingdom could have been reflected by his success. It's odd that he has sort of almost seemed at times to be chasing the white supremacist vote, but nonetheless, he represents a great example of the benefits and the power of the kind of immigration that much of his party seems diametrically opposed to these days. He's from an NHS family. His dad was a GP. I mean, all of these things on paper. He went into the city, so I bet he'd be a good chancellor. He's quite well turned out. He obviously takes a little bit of time over his appearance, unlike some Conservative prime ministers of recent years that we could mention. So what is it? What is it about him? Why has it all gone so wrong for Rishi Sunak? Because the more I think about this, the more I do wonder whether he is actually being punished for what went before, more than he is being punished for what has happened on his watch. I mean, if you had to pick one thing that he could have done differently, and I'm not letting you have Braverman anymore, that's too obvious. One thing that he could have done differently, what would that thing have been? What would have happened if he'd abandoned the ludicrous Rwanda plan the minute that the Supreme Court said that it was not compatible with UK law? Because that, for me, is the moment where he lost the plot. He may not have lost the room, or at least the room that he cared most about, but that is the moment when he lost the plot, because that is when he had to start talking gibberish about foreign courts and making it sound like Brexit Mark II, when in fact what he should have done as a Conservative Prime Minister is say, look, I was keen on this policy. I mean, that would be a lie because we know that he wasn't. But he could simply have said, I understand why some people were keen on this policy, but it is in defiance of UK law, and I will not be, no Conservative Prime Minister should ever treat the rule of law with contempt, which is a nice little dig at Boris Johnson. And in fact, he could say no Conservative Prime Minister should ever treat reality with contempt, which would be a nice little dig at Liz Truss. And yet it seems to me that the Rwanda plan is all he's got left now. It seems to me that that is pretty much all he's got left. And that's designed to stop support hemorrhaging further to the right, to the party which, for reasons that we may explore later this week, continues to attract Hitler fans, Nazi sympathisers and fascists on an extraordinary scale. So he's trying to stop support hemorrhaging further to the right. But the problem with using immigration in that way is that the fella further to the right will always go further than you. So even if you did start deporting people on an epic scale, the fella further to the right than you would start calling for immigrants to be executed or you know, made to wear bibs as they walk up and down the road that identify them as people who weren't born here or who can't trace their families back to the Doomsday Book. The rhetoric of racism will always trump reality. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe there's a sense, and I don't know whether this will come out as sympathy for Rishi Sunak or really, really sharp criticism, really hard criticism. Is the thing that gets your goat most about him is what I'm looking for today. All right, 0345 6060973. Because I think I've just worked out what it is for me. Have you? Listening to this bilge, have you worked out what penny is actually in the process of dropping while I speak? I think, Nikos has. So, well, Nikos has sort of got there. I think so I'm trying to articulate a sense of almost discombobulation, more than discomfort, a sense that when I watch him, there's an inauthenticity that I haven't been able to quite pin down. What is it? What is wrong with him? Question. Answer. I don't believe him. And I don't mean I don't believe him when he claims that he's brought inflation down a couple of years after claiming that it had gone up because of world events and things beyond his control. It's not that I don't believe him when he says, I think I'm going to win. I don't mean traditional don't believe a politician territory. I think with Rwanda in particular and immigration in general, I don't think he means it. This is it, isn't it? Because this, of course, if we are all recognising this on a subliminal level, if on the subconscious, when he talks about immigration and deporting people in ways that are designed to assuage voters even further to the right than the Conservative Party is, then some people are going to just see his ethnicity and not believe him. People on the right, well, racists, are going to see the colour of his skin and not believe that he wants to get rid of asylum seekers as much as they do. But then other people who I couldn't give two hoots about the colour of his skin, they don't believe intellectually or emotionally that he has the same nativist urges as the people whose votes he's trying to win. So if you asked me, if this was your show, and you were asking me to ring in and say, what is it about him that just doesn't feel right. I would say I don't think he believes in his biggest policies. I think this is government by focus group. What have you got to do to stop hemorrhaging support to the right and minimise your losses a fortnight tomorrow? You've got to convince those people who hate immigration and hate immigrants. You've got to convince them that you feel like they do. And he's failing on both fronts because people who do hate immigration don't believe him, and people who don't hate immigration don't believe him either, which makes him inauthentic. So even a moderate Conservative is going to struggle to vote for Rishi Sunak because they think that he's lying about how much he wants to deport people to Rwanda. And then, of course, we have the little reminders that both Rishi Sunak and James Cleverly, who's now in charge nominally of the deportation policy, reportedly derided it in private. And the other thing about him, it's inauthenticity is what we're nudging towards. The other thing about him is that I don't think he's centre-right. I've noticed Farage using the phrase centre-right lately. Have you noticed? They're not centre-right. Centre-right is Ken Clarke. Centre-right is sort of Philip Hammond and Theresa May, although her period in the Home Office probably flirted with slightly further right. There's nothing centre-right about wanting to deport genuine asylum seekers fleeing war and famine. But that little bit there, what is it about him that just doesn't quite ring true? I think that might be it. What do you think? 0345 6060 973. So loads of questions, some of which I can remember, some of which I can't. A general sense, with 2 weeks tomorrow to go, that we are having a little bit of a roundup. It's not a pylon, John. John says another Sunak pylon. What a surprise! It's not a pylon, mate, because no one's spoken yet except me. But and also obviously people are welcome to ring in and say I don't think there is anything wrong with him. I think he's brilliant. In which case the question becomes why is it all going so badly for him poll wise then? And that's when we come back to the beginning. And the beginning was how much of this is on him? How much is him, and how much is inheritance? How much is of his plight is a consequence of what went before, the 14 years that went before, and how much of his plight in the context specifically of the polling, how much of it is on him? So, I mean, come at this from whatever angle you please, but it all leads to that final question, doesn't it? How much of this is on Rishi Sunak, and how much of it is down to what went before? In the interest of balance, after John's slightly rude contribution, David's been in touch to say this analysis is so good. There's a PhD in this for someone. I think there is, actually. And it's certainly not one I could do. I haven't got the brains. But the idea of not convincing the nativist snarlers that you are one of them, while simultaneously not convincing people who look at stories like Rishi Sunak's families and feel a warm glow of satisfaction at the success, the historical and continuing success of mass immigration. Those of us who feel that way don't believe that he hates it. So he's kind of damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. It is 10:17. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Hit the numbers now. You will get through. 19 minutes after 10 is the time. The sort of question of Rishi Sunak's inability to connect with the population is at the heart of today's inquiries. What do you think it is down to? And is it possibly not his fault at all, but rather a consequence of the 14 years of Conservative government that preceded him? Terrible news for him on at least one front today. He'll claim a win on inflation, and everybody honest will point out that when it rocketed, he claimed it had nothing to do with government policy in the UK. But the Home Office has said that the number of people crossing the English Channel yesterday in small boats was the highest number on a single day so far this year. Some 882 people crossed the English Channel on Tuesday. We might do a phone-in on why that enrages some people so much, that figure, and leaves other people feeling, well, either ambivalent or deeply concerned. Some people will listen to that story and go, oh, Lord, I hope they're all right. And other people will listen to that story and feel a kind of epic anger. I wonder what the differences are between those people. But we'll talk about Rishi Sunak first. Toby's in Bristol. Toby, what would you like to say?
Good morning. I think that I'm not a Tory voter and never will be. But,
you can't say you never will be. You never know. Never say never.
But I think the thing that stands out to me most is that initial speech that he made when he first walked out about transparency, professionalism and accountability, where he sort of failed on all three, staggeringly. I've never come across a government that was so opaque in its accountability to the people and the choices that he's made. I do agree with you that he is hamstrung by his past, or rather his party's past,
yes,
and the fact that he is, in a way, being punished for their failures. But I think that he's brought it all an awful lot on himself, because he was so fundamental to, central to government for many years now.
Yeah.
And he can't see, we can't just use is he just being punished by the far right, who are just, as you say, you can't feed it enough.
No, of course you can't. I mean, I was only kind of half joking when I said that if he does successfully deport people, then someone further right will call for them to be killed, because we've kind of seen them flirting with that kind of rhetoric in the context of what should be done about the boats actually crossing the channel. We've seen some truly grisly suggestions in that field. So it's not an exaggeration to describe the fact that someone will always go further. Once you start pursuing the nativist snarls, there will always be someone going harder and faster. But are we in danger, Toby, of judging him from our own palette of values rather than, and I'm describing you thus, Lee, because you said you would never vote Tory. So your own palette of values wants a Prime Minister to put clear blue water between himself and Boris Johnson, or himself and Liz Truss. And you want integrity, professionalism and accountability. How has he lost the people who will never not vote, or who would have said to me 5 years ago, I will never not vote Conservative? How's he lost them? Is it the same process?
It's partly because they're being given an opportunity to focus on a group of people who, in a populist way, exactly present themselves to what they want to hear. In some ways, in a similar way that I want a liberal, sort of centre-left government that actually looks after people. And that's what appeals to me.
Yes.
Because they're being sort of having the reform vote dangled in front of them. It's quite interesting. My family have just been over to Germany, where my father was Kindertransport. I've spoken to you before about this.
I remember.
But they went over as part of the St Albans project, and they were talking about, they were sort of the incomprehensibility of the Brexit decision, but also on the flip side, the European vote, where a lot of the 16-year-olds are voting for the AFD, because the issues are being dangled in front of them. And it was one of the most striking things that came out of that was the local rabbi who is in charge of the synagogue, who's an Orthodox rabbi, said that they are voting for the AFD because they want to get rid of the foreigners, in inverted commas. Yeah. And so what's happening over here is a similar process where the right is being offered ever more and more extreme opportunities and offerings, and they all go for it. And what's clear is from the not the voting intention, but certainly the polling, is a very large chunk of the conservative vote are going for it because it's just too tempting.
But he must have calculated. The phone line's not great, Toby, so I shall say thank you and goodbye. It's a perfect start to our conversation. But you would think, and I don't know whether it's fair or just to bring his ethnicity into this part of the conversation, but you'd have thought that somebody from an ethnic minority background would have understood better than the rest of us, well, better than me, certainly. I think with your Jewish heritage and your dad's history, obviously you would be in the category I'm about to describe, and the category that I'm not in. You would understand, the insatiability of that beast once you start trying to feed it, the blaming of the foreigner, the blaming of the alien, the blaming of the other for a country's problems. You'd have thought that they would have, I don't know, that they would have known, that Sunak would have known better than most or better than many how impossible feeding that appetite, sating that appetite would be. Angus is in Milan. Angus, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello.
Thank you for taking my call.
You are most welcome.
Thank you all.
Arrivederci.
Buongiorno would be.
Yes,
would be thank you also for the daily dose of sanity that is your program.
You're very kind. Thank you.
I hook in every day. I think there are areas of all of our characters which we just are unable to control, and I think this is Rishi Sunak's undoing. I think he has a basic lack of emotional intelligence, which is an important thing. And if you look at that in the light, there's a very good book by a guy called John Ronson, which is called Psychopathy, A Journey Through the Madness. And was there ever a better way of describing the Tory party at this moment? But there's a scale of psychopathy, and it means lack of empathy, lack of understanding. Now, normally these people are very, very good liars, which is why they make good bankers. And I think, unfortunately for Rishi, he's not a good liar.
But he did make a good banker.
Precisely, yes.
It's called the psychopath test.
That's it.
Yes, not psycho, because I've read it, and then I thought, hang on, I haven't read that one that you're on about. I've read it. I know it. It is.
My error.
No, that's fine. I was just double checking. It's a brilliant book.
Yes. It's brilliant, and it does explain a lot. I mean, there are these people. Banks, actually, American banks, went looking for these people. If you scored high on the psychopathy test, that meant you would be a good banker.
Well, the last thing you want is a conscience.
Precisely, yes, precisely.
And you think he's in that category, or not?
I do. It doesn't mean you want to go out and eat somebody's liver with a plate of fava beans and a good Chianti. That's not what.
I nearly did the noise then. But I think it would reach, if people have got earphones on, it would sound absolutely horrible, wouldn't it? So I won't do that.
I just don't think he can help himself. I don't think he probably recognises it. I don't think he's a big enough man to be able to overcome it. And I think, sadly for the Tories, that they've just run out of good liars. He's not up to it.
An absence of empathy, but if you're a Johnson, then you can pretend, and people think, and Farage is, of course, brilliant at this, making people think that he has their interests at heart when he couldn't give two figs about any of them. So that maybe that's what I'm hinting at with the inauthenticity line then, this idea that he's saying all the right words.
He's trying.
But they're not landing right because of something, the intangible that he lacks, which you would describe as empathy or emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And there's so much focus on Tory honesty now, having had Boris Johnson and Liz Truss and the whole shower of them.
Yes.
That thankfully it's.
Could anyone have pulled this off? Could anyone have pulled this off? Could a sort of proto-Farage have actually pulled this off with the 14-year legacy in place?
I think
a brilliant liar.
I think they've tipped too much effluent into the river to be able to salvage it at this point, haven't they?
Both metaphorical and literal. Well played, Angus. Thank you. 28 minutes after 10 is the time. You're looking after James O'Brien on LBC. Again, no danger, I don't think, of feeling sorry for him. But the question of how he could go along with Boris Johnson and things like that, I think can be fairly easily answered about being a recent arrival in politics. So you can't turn up in Parliament in 2015, become Chancellor in 2019, and then start telling the Prime Minister how politics works. You might think he should have done, or he shouldn't have gone along with it. But I think that is literally just the chronology of his career, the chronology of his life. The question I should have asked Angus then, and the question which I might ask you, who are the 20%? Who are the 20% that are still there? Because that first call that we took from Toby, when he said, I will never be a Tory voter, I always find that certainty it's all slightly troubling. I think it's probably something you could say now after the last 14 years. But I occasionally do remind you that I somehow ended up voting for Boris Johnson in 2008 to be Mayor of London. So I can't say what Toby said with my full chest because my own history disproves it. But is that what we've got now? We've just got this 20% figure. What on earth are they enthusiastic about? John could give me a ring who said, oh, no, not another Rishi Sunak pylon. Is that just people who've had their brains boiled since birth that the Labour Party is going to come and steal their candlesticks or send their children down mines? I mean, how can they be hemorrhaging to the right and making no inroads at all to the centre unless it is, as Luis reminds me of my own theory, unless it is just the tightness of the scarf tied around their neck cutting off the flow of blood to the brain. I may take your calls on that a little later, but we'll focus for the moment more specifically on Sunak. 10:30 is the time. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines. 33 minutes after 10 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Nigel in Belfast, big fan of Angus in Milan, so I like that. There's a lot of love on my switchboard at the moment. It won't last, I'm sure. Angus was brilliant, James. He said what I've been thinking, and it was definitely not bilge. Some people don't like me using that word. I don't know why. But the question of Rishi Sunak's curious condition and what we think lies behind it. When a politician ends up in a situation where they can't do anything right, is it their fault, or is it almost the inheritance of what has gone before? Like, what's the phrase? Carrying the can. Is he carrying the can for what has gone before, going right back to 2010, austerity, and then everything that's followed? My colleague and friend Lewis Goodall makes a very good point when he reminds us on Twitter this morning that Rishi Sunak, when asked by Nick about, or by a caller, I don't know which, about all the money that the party has accepted from the racist businessman Frank Hester, Rishi Sunak talked about him having recognised his mistake, but of course he never accepted that it was racist. Hester never accepted it that it was racist. I don't think that Rishi Sunak would have described it as racist unless Kemi Badenoch had beaten him to it. She sort of broke ranks a little early, if I remember correctly, and quite rightly described Frank Hester's comments about Diane Abbott as racist. But he still continues, the racist businessman Frank Hester continues to deny that what he said about Diane Abbott making him want to hate all black women had anything to do with the colour of her skin, which is quite an extraordinary flex that Rishi Sunak this morning has either forgotten or perhaps deliberately dissembled about. Here is the statement from that day. Frank Hester accepts that he was rude about Diane Abbott in a private meeting several years ago, but his criticism had nothing to do with her gender nor colour of skin. So she makes me want to hate all black women, has nothing to do with gender or skin colour. Okie dokie. Peter is in Leeds. Peter, what would you like to say?
I've had the pleasure of speaking to you before. I've been an NHS doctor for 48 years.
Crikey.
But I'm still young at heart because I was either a junior doctor or I speak to lots of them.
Yes.
And this morning was all Rishi's fault. In what one
did it not go well, Peter?
In just one. I'm only talking about one question.
Go on.
And that was the way he handled the junior doctor ringing in. And all he could say to that junior doctor that was positive was, "We're all grateful to what you've done." Yeah. That girl will either be going on to or coming off a 16-hour shift. In her jobs, she will have moved around in her first 2 years, every 4 months from one job to the next, and she will have paid for all the moves. She will have paid for all her exams. And the reason why the junior doctor's strike is going on is because all Mr. Sunak can say is, we'll get the waiting list down, and if we don't, it's your fault.
Yes, he has done that.
The second thing he says is, we're very grateful. The way you're grateful is you look at their rotas. The way you're grateful is you look at the privatising of the catering, which means that girl over a 16-hour shift will be lucky if she gets a cold salad from a dispensing machine at 4:30 in the morning.
I've got a clear picture. Hang on, yeah. I've got a clear picture of the grievances of the junior doctors. Although I'm grateful to you for dotting the i's. Hang on. What I want you to give me is what it is about Rishi Sunak in particular, or in person, that speaks to this issue. What did he get? What was it about him that made his response so unsatisfactory for you?
That's a fantastic. I'm really glad you asked that question because it brings my main point.
That's what it was designed to do, Peter.
Sorry about that.
Carry on.
Through the campaign, the Lib Dems have caught on like mad.
Yeah.
Because they talk about we need more people. The Wes Streeting has caught on. if you compare his interviews now with what it was like at the beginning of the campaign, now he is saying there are lots of things we could discuss with the junior doctors. And the junior doctors are saying, fantastic, please, that's what we need.
And he is saying...
And all Rishi can say, in spite of all that, in spite of the fact that he knows he's going to be, flying off to some sunny climes in California at the end of this month.
I don't know about
he still hasn't got the answer. Because all he says is, we think you're doing ever so well, or we're very grateful. So he doesn't say. So there's two problems.
Yeah, it's a glibness. So Angus identified that as an absence of empathy. I think you could both be right. It may even be a 52-48 split, Peter. We all love 52-48 splits. But what you're describing is an inability to engage intellectually rather than empathetically or emotionally. This is where the spreadsheet thing becomes a criticism rather than a compliment. He's just got some Pavlovian reactions to certain points. Junior doctors, you say junior doctors, I say grateful. I don't engage with the grievance. I don't even admit the scale of the grievance, and I certainly don't do anything to try to stop the industrial action. It's like he's governing in black and white.
And I agree with you, but I'm a simple doctor, so rather than use special phrases, my simple answer is him and the rest of the Tory party don't listen.
They don't listen. And because they don't listen, they don't care. Or maybe because they don't care, they don't listen.
And that's why the teachers are leaving. They don't listen to the policemen, and that's why the policemen are leaving. They don't listen to the prison officers, and that's why they're leaving. But the worrying thing that he is not acknowledging is that girl who he is talking to.
You're supposed to say young woman these days. I always feel it's not my place to sort of lecture you on stuff like that.
Right.
But my daughters, if they were listening, would be very unhappy with me for not picking you up on that.
All right. Well, I apologise to your daughters, and I apologise to the junior doctor. But
God, it's not that hard, Peter. You can do it. Come on.
No, I have said I apologise.
I know.
I've got two daughters. I mess it up all myself.
Well, ask them whether I'm right or wrong, will you, afterwards? Because I'm pretty sure I know what they'll say. But she got patronised.
Exhausted from telling me. Yeah, no, all right. That junior doctor, right, was basically could have been addressed as, we understand there are ways that we can improve your conditions.
Yeah.
And instead it was, we're very
great. Just acknowledge the grievance.
And they need to be listened to. And that junior doctor, whoever he or she was, has got a 40% chance that in 6 months' time she will be not in this country.
That is a statistic that should strike a chill into everybody's heart. Peter, great stuff. We will listen to that conversation, a clip of that conversation, actually, shortly after 10:45, when LBC's political editor Natasha Clark will join me to pick over. What did I used to say that for? I used to say to pick over the choicest morsels of the carcass of the week's news or something like that. Was that? I can't remember. So I did that. It was a long time ago, but it was at some point in my career. I don't think it was the radio show. Anyway, who cares? Peter, you're a star. Thank you. 10:41 is the time, and Ken is in Leon C. Ken, what would you like to say? We may never know. Let's go to Tunbridge Wells instead. Jack is there. Jack, what's going on?
Hello there. Yeah, just to speak. Nice to speak to you, by the way.
Likewise.
Just to speak on the whole why people aren't really trusting Rishi Sunak, or why there seems to be a sort of
disconnect.
Yeah, that's the one. I personally think, obviously, I've got Facebook and social media, and so have a lot of other people. And you see the videos floating around and whatnot. And I think it seems that it's more of especially in the cost of living crisis that we are in the moment.
Yeah.
I think it's the sort of financial disconnect, and we've all seen the petrol station blunder and all the other little hiccups. And I don't have anything against him as a person.
No.
He's doing his job the best he can. But I think where he was, when he tries to relate, we didn't have Sky and all that, it's, in my opinion, the average working man and woman will sort of look at that and go, he's saying that he wants to be a voice for the working man and woman and, help everyone, and especially with the cost of living. But he probably lives in a palace, and he's disconnected from what it's like to struggle for money and to struggle to pay for things and to struggle through life.
And that is not because of the size of his bank balance necessarily. It's actually because of how he has conducted himself in the public eye. Because you could have, tons and tons and tons of money in the bank and still have what I think we can refer to a bit patronisingly as
street smart.
Or the common touch.
Yeah.
Johnson, I think, probably had the common touch in a way, although he's a bit of a one-off. Farage, I guess, has the common touch, and it's usually quite dishonest. So in a way, we're back to Angus's point about him not being very good at dissembling, not being a very good liar. So, what you need is someone who can say, I really care about the difficulties that ordinary people are facing, and I really understand the cost of living crisis. And we sort of simultaneously know that he doesn't, but something about his manner means that we kind of half believe him anyway, and he hasn't got that, has he? He hasn't got that.
Well, I mean, politics is just fooling the masses anyway, really. But if you're good at your job, then you can...
Not always, but I take your point.
Yeah, exactly, and that's basically my main point, really.
Well, and I'd add one more thing to that, because you are in Tunbridge Wells, although you don't sound very disgusted. It was there, wasn't it, that he announced that he diverted public funds away from deprived urban areas to help people in your neck of the woods, which again probably speaks to that tin ear or that unfortunate.
I had heard of that. I work in Tunbridge Wells. I actually live. I'm based near Maidstone, but I work for Tunbridge Wells Council. So you hear things through the vine, and yes. It
was definitely. I maybe say he's standing in a sort of garden outdoors, boasting about taking money away from deprived urban areas to help what is a relatively affluent Kent borough. Although, of course, there will be poverty there as well. There's poverty everywhere. In fact, poverty is presumably one of the big drivers behind the most troubling headline of the week, which describes British children as being the shortest, fattest, and sickest in comparable countries, in comparable economies. We'll have a look at that a little bit later in the programme. But up next, Natasha will be with us to pick over some of the bones of Rishi Sunak's visit to this studio earlier today. Turns out, you could probably notice this, but it turns out I asked that question yesterday. Who and we clipped it up and stuck it online. Who are the 20% of people still expected to vote Conservative? So I may do it as a phone-in, but some of the answers that came in yesterday, this is from Baldrick's Prized Turnip, which is the name that John chooses to go by on Twitter. They are the Jacob Rees-Moggs and Boris Johnsons of this world. I don't know, mate. I think that Jacob Rees-Moggs probably find it all a little bit too moderate at the moment. And we've got some Penny Mordaunt, when asked to say something nice about Starmer, said it's good he's in opposition. It is 10:49, and oh crikey, here's a good one. JOB still hasn't revealed why he lives in one of the whitest areas in London. What does that even mean? Since when is Brentford one of the whitest areas in London, or even Chiswick, where I used to live? It's the London borough of Hounslow. Why do racists always think that you're a kind of secret racist when you point out that they're an explicit racist? Anyway, I digress. Natasha Clark is here, LBC's political editor. We had the Prime Minister in the studio.
In this very chair.
For an hour.
A whole hour.
How did it go?
Look, I think it was pretty tricky for him, James, I won't lie. I think he was very uncomfortable at times. And obviously that is always what happens when we put politicians in this chair and get them to talk about the real issues that they're facing day in, day out. And of course, Nick Ferrari and our fearless callers really did, I think, take him to task. And obviously the campaign's ongoing. I think he felt, to me, a little bit like he had lost a little bit of energy. Obviously, it's coming to the end of the campaign.
It's not.
He didn't
it's
feel...
2 weeks and a day to go.
Oh, it's been four weeks off it.
I mean, he should be hitting his stride now.
I mean, I'm pretty knackered myself, I'll be honest.
Fair enough.
But look, I think there was a touch of exhaustion in him, and he didn't quite have the same sort of spark that I think we'd seen from him before. There were some questions he just didn't want to go into, talking about reform, talking about Nigel Farage, and he did have some very difficult exchanges on the NHS as well. Some highlights: he was asked how he can say that his plan is working when so many people are still struggling with the cost of living.
But the rest of the country is still struggling. How can you, with your test, say that your plan is working?
Oh, well,
Charlie, look, I know, as I said right at the beginning of the show, I know it's been a tough few years. Of course it has for you and everyone else. And when I got this job, my priority was to make sure we had economic stability. I said we'd halve inflation down from 11%, and obviously you saw today it's back to target at 2%, which is very welcome. The economy is now growing at a healthy rate as well. Energy bills are falling. Wages are rising. And the most important thing I can do for you and everyone else to give you that financial security is keep cutting your taxes. You work hard. Everyone listening works hard.
He was also asked by a young caller why she was being made to do national service. He said actually his 2 young daughters apparently very excited about it.
Morning, Prime Minister. My name's Ayagi. I'm 17. I just wanted to ask, why should I have to do national service and what do I gain from it?
Morning, Ayagi. Thanks for the question. I've got 2 girls who are a bit younger than you, and I'm excited for them to do national service, to be part of something, contribute to something in their community, actually, help change their lives, right? And it gave them a sense of purpose and identity, and I think service can do that for you, as well as you saw in that case, learning a really practical set of skills that have helped them and allowed them to help other people.
Are your daughters excited about the possibility,
yes,
Mr. Sunak?
As I said, they're more excited about that than they were when I announced maths to 18, I can tell you that.
What do you sense they would seek to do? Would they want to do actual...
They're having that debate. I think I've got one of each at the moment.
There was also...
I don't think they'll be living here, will they? In the unlikely event that it ever gets brought. No, they would be living here if it ever got brought in, because that would involve him winning the election. But did he just say his children had volunteered, and that's a good reason why compulsory national service is a good thing?
He says that his 2 children are very excited about the idea of national service. One of them apparently wants to volunteer for the actual army part, and one of them wants to volunteer for the volunteering part, which will be a bit different. But yes, whether we'll never know whether they really feel like that or not. Maybe one day we'll ask them. There was also a very interesting moment as well where he was asked about John Caldwell of Phones for You. Yesterday you'll have seen the news that he's switching to now back the Labour Party. He said that the rich could afford Labour's tax rises.
They're 2 of Britain's richest men. They can probably afford Labour's tax rises, but for tens of millions of people who are working really hard, they can't.
Healthy, Mr. Sunak.
I want to cut people's taxes. Right, that's what I'm wanting to do for this country. We've started already by a £900 tax cut for everyone in work. I want to go further if I win this election to give people financial security. And what we've seen from Labour Party just literally yesterday on your own show, Nick, Keir Starmer here, all over the place. Can't rule out whacking everyone's council tax up. I'm not going to do that. I want to cut people's taxes at every stage of their life. And that's the choice for everyone at this election.
But finally, he did have a very difficult exchange, I thought, with a junior doctor called Olivia. She's also called him before. She told us that she was very frustrated that the Prime Minister hadn't made more progress on solving the strikes.
So I am a striking junior doctor, as you may remember, and I have dedicated 16 years to my career so far and to my patients. I spoke to you last year, and today I find myself in exactly the same situation. Why do you think we failed to make any progress?
Yeah. I don't remember the specifics, but I do remember that Olivia called.
You hinted that industrial action wasn't helping in trying to get the waiting list down. Just to give you the sort of...
So, Olivia, thanks for your commitment to the NHS, and thanks for all the hard work. And look, it's been frustrating not to have been able to find a resolution with your union, and I very much hope that we can. And we have now found a resolution with, I think, every other part of the NHS workforce. I think we got the news yesterday, as you would have seen, that the SAS doctors also have accepted the government's offer, coming on the back of the consultants accepting the government's offer, coming on the back of the A Million Agenda for Change NHS workers accepting the government's offer a year ago or so. So look, we found resolution with every other part of the NHS workforce. That's really positive, and I'm grateful to everyone for working with us in a constructive manner. The only part of the workforce we haven't been able to do that with are the junior doctors, and I very much hope if I'm re-elected I can sit down again with your union and find a way through.
Some very robust exchanges there. I thought it was overall, I think it was a more difficult phone-in than yesterday with Keir Starmer. And like I say, I think he also faced some very, very difficult callers. And I do think both of them really struggled to turn it around in terms of when we went to the caller and said, are you satisfied with these answers that you're getting from both of them? I think both of them really struggled to get that across. But the PM, I think, definitely appeared much more downbeat than I'd ever seen him before.
A few people making this point, which I don't think many journalists have made. But the election has descended into arguments about tax with accusations flying around that the other fellow's going to raise them. And yet the country, everyone acknowledges that the country's in all sorts of trouble and therefore needs more public spending. So that we are in a bit of a upside down world.
It is, and it's, you've got politicians have promised. We spoke about this yesterday. Politicians promising the world, but we've got no money to pay for it. And even Labour are not promising that they can wave a magic wand and make everything better. Keir Starmer was really honest about that yesterday when he did that phone in, and it is really very difficult for Rishi Sunak to make the case after 14 years, and especially since he's the one that he says has had to put taxes up. He says due to COVID.
If we were to read his mind, Rishi Sunak's, and identify what he considers to be his most potent policy position or most potent promise, what would it be? The single one.
What do you think his best achievement would be?
Not even achievement, but just in terms of what do you think if you were to keep hitting the public over the head with one thing, whether it's a rhetorical flourish, a statistic, a claim, a pledge, a policy, a promise, what would it be?
Well, we've seen it from what he wants to talk about the Labour Party. It's all about tax, isn't it? He wants to absolutely whack that on the head with them repeatedly.
It's not landed at all. The polls haven't nudged since they started disseminating that fib about £2,000. And then, of course, the Conservatives' House Journal, former Boris Johnson fanzine The Spectator, applied the same tests to the Tory proposals and came up with a figure of £3,000. So
exactly. But yes, he believes clearly that that's still the best strategy for winning this election. But all the polls pointing, and he didn't want to talk about that this morning. He repeatedly tried to slap Nick down when he tried mentioning the polls. And he got, I think, a little bit agitated at the idea. This is the only poll that matters. It's not till July the 4th. No one's voted yet.
He wouldn't be saying that if he was 20 points ahead, would he? And this is where politicians perhaps are all a bit similar.
Of course.
So don't look at the polls if you're doing badly. But my goodness, campaign on them if you're doing well.
But you have to, obviously, literally on every front page of every newspaper every time, aren't they?
And a word if you would on how much attention Downing Street will be paying to the polls, regardless of what Rishi Sunak may say on air.
I think privately, many people in Downing Street look at the polls and they acknowledge that it's not moved. They've acknowledged that while they are, throwing everything at it and trying very hard to move them, they all acknowledge that things aren't looking good. And privately, Conservatives are, looking at some of the polls that we've had out in the past few days, some of them Tory majorities. You only have to look at where Rishi Sunak was campaigning yesterday in areas of West Devon, Geoffrey Cox, huge majority of 22,000. If he's campaigning in areas like this, are they really, really worried that they could be losing seats with such huge Tory majorities? It would be shocking if so, but it does seem like some of these places, some people saying if it's less than 15k, they're lost. Even further, I had one really worried staffer message me the other day with a majority. I think their MP had a majority of around 22,000 saying, should I be worried? And I think under 20,000 people, under 20,000 majority, there are MPs that are worried about that, and completely rightly so. If you look at the swing that's needed for Keir Starmer to win the election, and many psephologists believe that's 16% to 12 to 16% swing, I think it is. They believe that is in reach, and that really is saying something, isn't it?
Well, yes, and it actually leads into the question that I may ask in the next hour, which is who is the 20%? Because you've seen people hemorrhage to the right with lots of promises to be even viler about immigrants and immigration in general. There's absolutely no movement to the middle. So who is in this category of people that is left there? We may have a look at that in the next hour. We may continue to pick over the bones of Rishi Sunak's interview this morning, or we may, in the spirit of Monty Python, we may do something completely different. It is 3 minutes after 11 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where I'd like to stress something, actually. And what I'd like to stress is that the invitation that I was about to offer you, that I was about to make, was born of a kind of confusion, a confusion that perhaps displays my own political biases, but I would defend myself from that accusation with statistics. And I would point at those polls that we were just talking to Natasha about, and the it is at the moment the historically unprecedented unpopularity of the Conservative Party as we are 2 weeks and 1 day out from a general election. But I caught myself in the news ignoring the fact that there may well be perfectly pleasant and sensible reasons to be in that tiny constituency of voters intending to vote Conservative. We have to tread very carefully on constituency-based issues, but only insofar as if you say something that worries me or makes my political paranoia radar start beeping, then I have to remind you can find a list of all the candidates. Can we just record me saying that? You can find a list of all the candidates at lbc.co.uk/election, is it? Or something? No, apparently not. What? Candidates. Oh, that's easy. Can you record this and then just press play every time we need it? You can find a full list of all the candidates at lbc.co.uk/candidates. There we go. That was nice. But we leave that with me. I'll worry about that, or Eleanor will. The invitation then needs to be double, and it has to be in good faith. So you can tell me if you want that you are voting Conservative for very good reasons. I just can't quite at the moment make sense of the split. Because if you are if you are a nativist snarler, if you wake up in the morning absolutely obsessed about immigration and you struggle or you spend your life on those sort of websites where they find somebody committing a crime who is from a certain background and therefore conclude that everybody else from the same background must be a wrong and must be deported and must be drowned in the middle of the English Channel. And it's a decent-sized constituency of people. There's always a potential of seeing that constituency grow from 15 to 20%. So I can see why you've left the Tory party, because he hasn't stopped the boats and because you are now in a place where the only people who will enjoy your support are the people who you believe, rightly or wrongly, hate foreigners as much as you do. Right? That tragically is where the Tory party has tacked to in recent years. And it has with your Suella Bravermans and your Kemi Badenochs, your honest Bob Jenricks, and it hasn't managed to stem much of the flow to the Reform Limited Company with its majority shareholder Nigel Farage. That's their tactic. Almost everything they are doing is dedicated to stemming that flow. I get that. But who does it leave in their own fold? Who is actually there looking at... Is it, for example, just a fear of Keir Starmer? Some of the lines that have been punted by the right-wing media might strike some of us as borderline hilarious, but maybe your mum believes them. I always remember speaking to somebody when we were trying to get our heads around Fox News for the first time from this side of the Atlantic. And someone sent me an article that described children visiting their parents who had fallen under Fox News' spell and truly believing that Barack Obama was going to come to their home in person and take their guns or take their family heirlooms. And that level of manipulation, media manipulation of a population is really hard to grasp if you've never fallen victim to it. But there will be stuff like that out. You know, if you've swallowed the Daily Mail every morning for the last 14 years, then today's front page, Labour's secret tax rise dossier is clearly designed to spook you into not voting Labour, into voting Conservatives because Labour's going to steal your candlesticks. So I just, and I stress that this isn't coming from a position of criticism, at least not in the first instance. I obviously reserve the right to get critical, but I'm genuinely curious. So I voted Labour in 2019, despite knowing that the leader of the Labour Party was an absolute liability and that the party had no chance whatsoever of winning. So I guess it was a constituency-based vote for me, but also under no circumstances whatsoever would I be able to vote for Boris Johnson. It was very much a general election that was fought between a rock and a hard place. But I don't think Sunak or Starmer are anywhere near as bad as the two party leaders at the time of the last general election. So reasons why you voted for a party that was desperately unpopular and doomed to fail in 2019 will not be the same reasons why you voted for a party that was desperately unpopular and doomed to fail in 2024. And I don't know currently what those reasons are. 9 minutes after 11 is the time. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. It may not be you, but it may be someone you know, someone you love. I'd rather get the horse's mouth on, but I don't mind speaking to the horse's mouth's daughter, the daughter of the horse's mouth. What is the process? Who are the people who make up this historically low number of voters poised to back the Tory party 2 weeks tomorrow. Okay, hit the numbers now. You will get through. 0345 6060 973. Because, you know, the tax toing and froing is meaningless, both accusing the other. Starmer's caution has diffused almost every traditional attack line that you use against Labour, something that frustrates a lot of Labour voters. I've got to be honest with you. But the idea that private schools. People who don't want to pay VAT on their private. There we go. That's my opener. And whether they can afford it or not, nobody's going to vote for a 20% increase in one of their major outgoings, are they? Like explicitly and specifically. No one is likely. Well, actually, I am. But not many people are going to vote explicitly and consciously for a 20% increase in one of their major monthly outgoings. So is that you? Is that enough? And I'm not here to... We had arguments yesterday about this policy. I don't want to have a ding-dong today about that specific policy, but I do want to hear from you if that is your reason. Who is in this 20% of voters who are wooed neither by the nativist snarls of Nigel Farage or the centrist caution of Keir Starmer? Because, I mean, you know, cephalogically, Natasha reminded me of that word earlier. Cephalogically, you understand that, and you understand why the Tory party is in such mortal peril, because it is being sucked from both sides, which very rarely happens in British politics. I can't remember. Can you remember a comparable time where a domestic general election, not a Euro election, had the governing party being cannibalised both from the left and the right? And because the Tories have moved so far to the right, the left is now the centre. They're being cannibalised by cautious centrism in one direction and by promises to be even more racist or even more nativist, even more xenophobic from the other direction. Who on earth will be left? And that is my question, because you're not going to get 20% of the electorate solely voting on the basis of having to pay more school fees, because the numbers will be relatively negligible. And, of course, some of us will be paying it quite happily. So who is left? You've got people being... I should stop saying sucked, shouldn't I? I think cannibalised is a better word. People being cannibalised, the party's being cannibalised from the right by the usual sort of immigrant-based bile, and cannibalised from the left and the centre by cautious centrism. Who on earth is going to be left once that process of cannibalisation is over? Gareth in Wigan says, are you really going to vote to impose economic sanctions on yourself? I suppose in a sense I am, Gareth, but the bigger picture, of course, would be a move towards greater fairness across the country, which maybe some people did think that they were doing in 2016. And, of course, they would be unable to defend that position now, but we will allow them to claim that is what they thought was going to happen in 2016. And Carl says, James, it's a silly question because they don't do any research. They just read the Tory rags and believe them. Well, in which case, you've got to have to show me someone. You're going to have to produce a case study, Carl. You're going to have to tell me about the person who would never, ever not. So my mum's got some friends in this category. Old school family friends who sort of made black country entrepreneurs. People who just can't. It would be like going to church naked or turning up at a coffee morning dressed as Noel Edmonds. There is no earthly way they would not vote Tory. And they intrigue me as well, because you might think some of them might have been cannibalised from the right. So who is left in that category? And can we make any helpful generalisations about them? Okay? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. I'm going to clear my the inbox that I use to select things to read out and pick a few of my favourites while you enjoy a brief hiatus, and then we'll come back with your answers to this question of who is, with the Tories hovering around the 20% mark, historically low, the lowest figures since polling began, who's left in that camp? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. It's 11:14. 16 minutes after 11. Phil's been in touch. He says, me, James. Only joking. Alison says, people on a salary of over £100,000 who send their children to private school. I know one. And this is from Chris. O'Brien, I will be voting... You can call me James, Chris. You know, we've known each other a long time now. I will be voting Conservative, and I'm no racist. Starmer has failed to convince me and is Tory light, like Blair. That doesn't make any sense at all, mate. But at least you wrote down your reasons. Les in Beckenham can't. He writes, I may be voting Conservative on the 4th of July, but why would I phone you and explain why when you're just going to ridicule me and call me stupid? And it won't be about school fees. Les, I wouldn't call you stupid, seriously. But I would remind you, there's nothing to stop you texting your reasons for voting Conservative instead of your pathetic whining. Richard makes a constituency-based point, but says that his good constituency MP is quitting, so I won't be voting for either of the two main parties now. And David recognises my depiction of my hometown. And he says, as someone who grew up in the Black Country, it really is a peculiar voting mix. There are a lot of embarrassed millionaires. Don's in West Wickham to kick things off. Don, what would you like to say?
Oh, yes. Good morning. Well, basically, I don't trust Starmer. He was a Marxist lawyer, and last election he was supporting Jeremy Corbyn. And then when he became leader, he suddenly changed his tune, so got rid of Jeremy Corbyn, tried to get rid of Diane Abbott, but he seems to have failed in that respect. And, whatever he says, I think, well, what was he saying last time? One time he was telling the truth, the next time he can't be telling the truth of what he actually thinks.
Yes, I mean, that makes sense. It's not what you'd call a sort of ringing endorsement of Rishi Sunak, though, what you're telling me. So it's I suppose, more a question, I think, about why you are enthusiastic about the concern. I mean, perhaps you're not, but, reasons to dislike Keir Starmer, you could have written a Daily Mail column with that list. So what are the reasons to vote for the Conservatives?
Well, I think it's been pretty tough. Rishi's had the COVID thing to deal with, also Ukraine war. Okay, I accept the fact
why are they reasons to vote for the COVID and the Ukraine war are reasons to vote for the Conservative? Do you think there might be another COVID or another Ukraine war?
No, I'm just saying that I accept the fact that people are probably worse off now than they were when the Tories came into power.
Yes.
But I think that is not the fault of the government. He's had these crises.
What is their fault? What do you think the government has been responsible for over the last 14 years?
Well, I think Boris Johnson was fairly corrupt. I was turned off him. I forget the case now. There was something about someone he supported who turned out to be fairly dodgy, And
who his Chancellor was, don't you?
Yeah, I know who his Chancellor was, yeah. But...
So the positive reason to be a Tory voter now in 2024?
Well, I think they're better than Labour. There's only two.
No, I know you do, but that's why I'm asking for the reasons.
Well, you might say that's a negative reason, but nothing is perfect.
No, fair enough. No, it's a choice. You've got to pick one.
Vote Tory. I think I can justify my reasons to myself, logical in my own mind.
Well, that's the main thing, isn't it?
Basically, I don't trust Starmer.
What's a Marxist lawyer?
A Marxist lawyer?
Yes.
Well, he thought the police should be disbanded originally when he started out as a lawyer.
Yes, but that's not something that he's enacted or pursued as a lawyer, is it? That might have been an opinion.
No, well,
so what is it? What's the difference between a Marxist lawyer and a non-Marxist lawyer?
Well, the fact that someone's a lawyer, they can have any number of different political opinions.
Yes, but what's in terms of a lawyer? What would have happened if we had when he was director of public prosecutions? What do you think he did that was Marxist?
Well, I understand when he was director of public prosecutions, so it's been alleged. I mean, I can't say this.
Remember, this has to be Marxist. There has to be something Marxist.
Well, he was he was defending the accused in this case, and the prosecutions didn't take place.
Well, he can't have been defending someone when he was director of public prosecutions, Don.
Well, he was.
So
what
did he do?
He was the one who decided not to prosecute. Put it that way. I didn't make myself clear.
Are you talking about Jimmy Savile?
Yes, possibly.
Because that's a lie. That's a lie made by Boris Johnson, who you correctly described as being morally corrupt a few moments ago. But let's pretend it's true. How is it Marxist?
Well, I believe he was Marxist because he was sort of very, very extreme left wing.
Yes, but what did he do?
Would you say Corbyn's a Marxist?
What? Well, you need to tell me what you think Marxism is first.
Well, Marxists outside Russia are very left-wing. They believe in disbanding everything, taking over the state, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
I think he was along those sort of lines.
Yeah.
Basically,
but we've got no evidence at all. But we think he's a Marxist.
No, can I just say he seems to flip-flop the whole time.
So he's not a Marxist.
He has done throughout his career.
So he's not a Marxist.
Probably I was wrong to describe him as a Marxist.
It was your main reason for voting Conservative.
Well, I think...
And it was wrong.
Provided with a... Well, OK, I'm fairly old. I remember going right back to when the Labour government under Attlee, we had a financial crisis then. Every Labour government we've had has ended up in a financial crisis.
Right.
So, OK, I'm not saying that the Tories are perfect. Clearly they're not, because
but you don't fancy the alternative. That's absolutely fine, Don, and good luck to you. It's 22 minutes after 11. Ian's in Hook. Ian, what would you like to say?
I'm not going to suggest I'll give a reason for voting Tory because I haven't got one. I've got a reason for not
heard a few.
voting. Well, I don't believe in any of them. I'm hoping I'm not going to get the same sort of tasting as the last caller, but I can't vote Labour because it will make me poorer. I've got to make some real life decisions about my children over the next 2 years. They're in the same. I went to state school, and throughout my life, I've worked incredibly hard in order to have or scrimp and save the money to get them into the system that they're in.
Yeah,
and it's going to become unaffordable. Equally, I'm not a racist, so I'm not going to go anywhere near reform.
How many people do you think there are like you? I can't argue with you. I can't argue with you, by the way. Your reasoning is impeccable. Right? Your reasoning is impeccable.
7%, right? We know it's 7%. Add on the grandparents, that makes it 14%.
Yeah, maybe. Take off the people who are much richer than us or much richer than you.
Well, the people that are much richer than us aren't going to be affected, are they?
No.
And they're going to go, yeah, that's not a problem. Here you go. So, my argument is it's going to make an elite system more elite, and that... Coming back to
I said we weren't having that debate today. We had that debate yesterday. So no, you've said it now, and it's me that has to bite my tongue and not come back with my well-rehearsed dismantlings of that position. But this is why.
I did actually listen to your the position the other week when you actually said, "Is this going to make it more elite or not?" But I was listening rather than actually calling.
Fair enough.
My position is simple. I would vote Labour. But I can't vote to make myself poorer. I can't vote to change my children's lives.
Yeah, I have failed to understand until this point, Ian, why they were hitting this so hard. And the reason why they're hitting it so hard and the reason why the right-wing newspapers are getting behind it, despite the fact that it doesn't seem to be nudging the polls at all, is that your position is absolutely unassailable. So in a world of variables and claims and counterclaims, your position, perhaps uniquely in this general election, is absolutely unassailable. It will cost you more to educate your children than under a Labour government than it will under...
I won't be able to educate both of them.
Well, even more sweeping then, even more unassailable a position.
And I am not a racist, so I will not vote for reform.
Yeah, I mean, how many Ians are there? That's the question.
Don't know.
I don't know either. Not enough to make a difference, I don't think. Certainly not enough to close the gap, because the gap is already there. But I have, just for the record, because my opinions on this policy and this whole issue are fairly well rehearsed. For the record, I have absolutely no beef with you. And were I in exactly the same position as you, it's possible I would make exactly the same decision that you have made. At 25 minutes after 11. That was already on the list, but only as a theoretical. When when Ian brings it firmly into the realm of the practical, that becomes, and I use the word advisedly, that becomes an unassailable position. So who's left? People who don't really want to vote Tory, but for whom arguably the most obviously substantive policy in the whole election debate, 20% on private school fees, which means absolutely nothing to the huge majority of the population, means a hell of a lot to some of them. 26 after 11 is the time. Mary Jane is in Reading. Mary Jane, what would you like to say?
Hello, hi,
Hello.
James. Yeah, I totally agree with the last speaker. Now, the thing is, we have our son currently in state school, and we are moving him to a private school just because of the numbers they have in his current class and how he struggled in that population class of 32 students in a class for one teacher. So we thought we would work harder. As two working parents, we're working our butts off.
I know. I just for the record, and I'm not arguing with you, but I can't let that pass. Loads and loads and loads of people, millions and millions of people, work just as hard as you and will never be able to afford to send their children to private school. So it's not. There's no relationship between how hard you work and private education. Millions of people who work incredibly hard. Because when you say it, and I know you don't mean it, but when you say it, it sounds to a lot of people as if you're suggesting people who don't send their children to private school don't work very hard. And I know that's not what you mean.
No, not at all in that sense. Is we made that decision, and because of that, we're going to give up a lot to have him private educated, 24,000 a year.
Yes.
And to hear that they're intending to put another 20% on top of that, again, that won't, like the last week said, affect the rich people because they have the money already and they're able to, what would 20% difference make for them? But for people like me,
it's the nibbling at the edges, and it's enough to settle your vote, and presumably your partner's vote as well, and that is it.
Yes.
Where would you be if, in the absence of that policy? What would you be doing?
Labour, I'll be voting in the absence of that policy, and because of that, I'm voting the Tories anyways.
Yeah, and that's two out of two. And as I say, Beatrice thinks the position is assailable. I'll read her text out in a moment, but I'm certainly not going to pick a fight with you or argue about that because it's a personal decision. Obviously, the political reality of it is that people who are, not even earning £24,000 a year, never mind having it that much left over in order to pay school fees, are currently subsidising private schools by the absence of VAT on that service, by the absence of VAT on that purchase. I'm just going to check this. No, this doesn't work, Beatrice. You say Ian's argument is totally assailable. He doesn't want to make himself poorer, yet he has been happy to vote Tory to make the whole country poorer, to make millions of kids destitute, to decimate the healthcare system when his kids could do wonderfully at a better funded state school under Labour. No, actually, number one, you don't know how he's voted in the past. I've very much got the impression that, like Mary Jane, in the absence of this very specific policy, he would be voting Labour. And you don't get, unfortunately, to have your children benefiting from a better funded state system in September by voting Labour 2 weeks tomorrow. You just don't, Beatrice. It is coming up to 11:30. Is there a reason other than private schools? And of course, Keir Starmer being a Marxist lawyer and Boris Johnson's well-rehearsed lies about Jimmy Savile, which I saw making a comeback on social media yesterday. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I don't think that's where Don picked up those opinions. I don't think it was on Twitter, but there's plenty of people there trying to punt it as reinflate that Boris Johnson era lie. It's coming up to 11:30. The number you need if you want to join this conversation is 0345 6060 973. The calculation, clearly, by the Labour Party is that they can live without the votes of people like Philip and Marianne, and think that it will actually someone said yesterday, described it as a way of telling the left that they haven't been forgotten about. So it could be simultaneously a successful policy, even as it measurably alienates voters like the two we've just spoken to. 11:30 is the time. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines. 33 minutes after 11. You need I've worked very hard, klaxon, says Scott. Well, I maybe should have seen that the conversation about voting Conservative would involve a lot of contributions about the private education policy that we discussed at some length yesterday. Quite a few of you pointing out that it's unlikely the 20% will be passed on entirely to fee payers. I think some research suggests it's going to be closer to 9%, and it's unlikely to be in place come September, come the beginning of the new school term. Say some other texters. I'm not so sure about the second point, but listen, if you're doing your sums, I appreciate that people should look at the bigger picture stuff, and I try to as an individual. But if you're doing your sums, thinking of my late father, thinking of my mum, and they've prioritised private education above many other things, in a way that they are lucky to be able to do, because lots of people who work just as hard would not even have a sniff of that choice for their children. They've prioritised that, they've done the sums, and this policy could be the difference between being able to afford it and not, in which case I don't think you can argue with their decision to vote in the way that they decide to vote. Well, of course you can argue with it, but I don't think I have to agree with you. 25 to 12 is the time. Andrew's in Lanark. Andrew, what would you like to say?
You said you were looking for who's voting Conservative if it's not rich business owners or people with kids in private school or. I
didn't say rich business owners. Just
okay.
the private school point was the first one to come up.
Right.
But you've got a different one, I hope.
It's me. I'm the person you're looking for.
Go on.
And just to help along, just one more point before I start. The guy who was on about Keir Starmer being a Marxist, he's not. What he is, to the core, is a solicitor. Because he'll
I think he was a barrister.
Represent a barrister, I beg his pardon.
That's all right.
He'll represent anybody who will pay him. He can be working for the CPS 1 week, and then before that, he could be a defence lawyer. He doesn't care. No principles. Pay me, and I'll represent you to the best of my ability.
Isn't that true of
his
doctors
job.
as well?
I'm talking about representing people who are clearly guilty. Anyway,
I'm talking about treating people who are clearly guilty. Isn't it just the same principle that applies to doctors?
Well, the doctors don't help the people stay out of prison, do they?
No, they help them stay alive.
Well, that's fine. We haven't got the death sentence in this country anymore, so there's nothing wrong with them staying alive.
No, but the cab rank principle that lawyers have to abide by, they have no choice in that process any more than doctors get to. Any more than doctors get to choose who they treat. So why is it okay for doctors but terrible for lawyers? All lawyers.
Because I'm not saying it's terrible for lawyers. I'm not judging it.
He's only doing what all lawyers do.
Exactly,
and this is your main reason for voting Conservative. So you must feel. Well, that's what you brought up.
I just wanted to correct the guy saying he's a Marxist. He's not. The guy.
I know he's not a Marxist.
So
I don't think that needed. No, hang on. Before you tell me the point you wanted to make, we'll just do another minute on the point you have made, and I want to know what the difference is between doctors and lawyers having no choice in who they provide their professional services to.
In that respect, there's no difference whatsoever.
So down with doctors. So you couldn't vote for a doctor then either.
Of course, yeah. I'm not. The reason I'm not voting for Keir Starmer is nothing to do with him being a lawyer. I made that point to correct the gentleman who was on previously. Yeah, he's not a Marxist. He's a solicitor.
He's not a solicitor. He's a barrister.
He's a barrister.
But that's got nothing to do. So that's got nothing to do with your vote.
No.
Okay, carry on.
So. The reason I'm the person you're looking for is because I'm none of the other previous people. What I am is I'm a 61-year-old man who left school at 15 and I've worked ever since. I've been a police officer for many years. Before that, I was a soldier for many years. And I'm now 61 years of age, in a lay-by. I'm a HGV driver for a living. I have got 4 kids that I've brought up and they're all contributing, they're all working, they've all got careers. And I have worked very, very hard for a very, very long time.
Yes.
The reason I'm not voting Labour is, rightly or wrongly, it's how I feel. I was always a Labour voter. I'm a working class guy. The last Labour person I voted for was Tony Blair. And what a disaster he turned out to be, champagne socialist. So
what does that mean?
What it means is, back in the day, you would get politicians who had...
No, what does champagne socialist mean?
It means he thinks he's a socialist, but he's not. He's a Tory.
His whole thing was that he wasn't a socialist.
Well, he got the socialist ticket. It was socialists that were voting for him. But he was the last guy I voted for.
So you're a socialist?
I don't know. I'm not sure what I am. I'm not a Tory. I'm not a socialist.
Okay.
Maybe I'm a liberal. I don't know. But here's what I do know.
Yes.
I feel that I cannot trust Keir Starmer in government, and we're going to find out because he is going to be the next Prime Minister. I'll bet my left leg on it. And when he's in, I can't wait to see what he does. It's sort of, I've almost got this doomsday feeling.
But I want your enthusiasm for the Tories a bit more than I want your doomsday feeling.
I'm going to give it to you.
I certainly don't want your left leg. So the thing that makes you feel positive or...
Well, I haven't finished my negative point yet. The reason I think he's going to ruin the country is because he's going to give everything away, mostly in benefits. Nothing to do with immigration. That's a very, very small part of our benefit system. There's a lot of people coming to this country. If it weren't for the immigration system that we had in the 60s, this country wouldn't be half what it is.
I mean, they've tried really hard to address this point. I mean, really hard, to the point where they've alienated some people who probably would describe themselves as socialists. Most obviously, Liz Kendall, the Shadow Work and Pension Secretary, talking about how under a Labour government, if you can work, there will be no option of a life on benefits. I think I've remembered that right from March of this year. That's passed you by, which is perfectly normal,
that has
Andrew.
Passed me by because I've never heard that, and I listen to this stuff on the radio all day. Because
that's my bad then. I've let you down on that one. I probably thought that was too. I probably thought that was a bit too dull to cover. But
it's really important to people. It's really important to people like me. I just feel that there are a section of the population who are working and putting money in the pot, and there are a large section who don't work, who will never work again, and in some cases, and I know some of these people personally, have never worked. I don't know how they've got away with it. They never worked.
That's been true for 14 years of Tory government.
Yeah, it has.
So why is it Labour's fault?
And it's not Labour's fault.
So why do you think that keeping the current people in power... But I've just told you that they say they're not. I mean, hey, they could be lying, but I mean, you think that things... Keep the people in charge who've let your friends never work because the other people might do even more of the same thing. Is that it?
Part of that decision is based on the fact that for two reasons. One, I haven't heard what you said.
No,
I've not
that's
heard
perfectly
that
reasonable. No, that's perfectly reasonable. But I mean, and to be fair, Andrew, they're hardly going to campaign on making it easier for people never to work, are they?
I understand that.
Yeah.
The Tories have said they're going to do something about it, and I know they've not done much for 14 years. However,
I mean, they've both made similar noises really on this. Can I ask you a personal question?
Of course you can.
What if you get sick? Or one of your 4 kids gets sick, what kind of support do you want them to get from the state? If they can't work.
I see what you mean. Not medical assistance. I mean, what support? I want them to be supported. I want people to be supported. I've got a neighbour right now.
But you don't, because, I mean, you think there's too much there already. Whereas most people living in the circumstances you describe, your friends who've never worked in their lives notwithstanding.
They're not my friends.
All right, your acquaintances that have never worked in their lives. It's unlikely statistically, unless they're breaking the law, that they live very comfortable existences. Most research would attest that the lot of an unemployed person in this country is one of the most ungenerous in the civilized world, certainly in Europe. But you've ended up thinking it's too generous.
What I think is that I don't think it's too generous. I think that
you do, Andrew.
You've got to let me finish, mate.
Well, no, I know, but I can't let you contradict yourself without pointing it out. You do think it's too generous.
I've never used the word generous. I think there are too many people on it who shouldn't be.
Yeah,
that's not generosity.
But that's 14 years of Tory rule. What's that got to do with Keir Starmer? What's that got to do with Keir Starmer?
It's 14 years of Tory rule, plus whoever was in before them.
Yeah.
It's gone on for years. This has gone on for decades.
Yeah.
And
so why is it a Labour thing then?
I didn't say it was a Labour thing. What I'm saying
this is what the whole phone-in's about, Andrew. Why you're going to vote for the people who have presided over what you're describing rather than the people who haven't.
Because I think the choice between Tory and Labour is I think the Tories may do something about it. I half believe them, and Labour, I don't think they will.
And the question about
I trust Tories a little bit more.
What do you want to happen when you get sick, or when your children get sick, or when you go through a period of unemployment? How much?
I want to be supported. Because I've put the money in, I've paid in all my life, and there's way too many people who never pay in and are taking out.
How do we find them, do you think?
Well, if the people, the working pensions people and the
What do you think they live on? Have you got any idea what they live on? The ones you know that have never worked in their lives. What's their sort of monthly income?
I've no idea, but I know that once you take
you must know. You must have some idea,
right? Job seekers allowance, I believe, is about £80 a week. It's not what they give; it's what they don't pay. They don't pay council tax. They don't pay rent. They don't pay apart from the electricity.
They pay more rent than they did when the Tories got in.
Apart from their electricity and their food bills, and obviously now because they can't afford
I think it's
food.
universal credit now, isn't it, rather than job seekers?
Universal credit. There you go.
No, job seekers is still a thing, I think. So 80 quid a week, is it?
I don't know. I think it is about that.
I think it's a bit higher if you're over 25. So what would you do on £90.50 a week?
I'd go out and get a job.
But you're currently on unemployment benefit.
Well, I wouldn't be. I'd be working.
Right. So everybody
Are you
who
going
is...
to say if I was ill?
No, I'm saying that's it. So the £90.50 a week is still too generous because obviously they need less because if it was less, they'd go...
Mouth,
well,
James,
what do you think they're doing then, Andrew?
It's not too generous.
But in what circumstances would that person go and get a job then? Because it must be too comfortable for them on £90 a week.
It's not just £90 a week, is it? I think you're being a bit naive, mate.
I'm talking about what their outgoings are. We can talk about whatever housing benefit is called these days, or council tax relief, or all the rest of it. But you must feel that the reason why these people are not going out and getting a job is because they're choosing to live on the income they receive from the state. Right? We can agree about that. I'm not putting words in your mouth, which means it's too much.
No, I'm not saying it's too much. What I'm saying is it works for them, and the system that's employed, maybe they have got other incomes that they're not disclosing.
Well, that's breaking the law.
Right, okay.
And we started off by attacking lawyers.
Right, okay.
So who do you want to prosecute? Who do you want to prosecute the ones that are breaking the law?
Well, we could get the police to do it if they could find the backside with both hands, but we know that's not.
That's another 14 years of Tory rule, but more of the same, eh?
It's not though, is it? When I was a police officer, Mr. Blunkett was in charge, and he was about as much use
as a chocolate teapot.
Yeah, that will keep it clean. Chocolate teapot. Actually, on a motorbike.
I'll make you laugh, Kat, but before you go, shall I?
Yeah, go on.
So when you said that you'd bet your left leg on something, Karen texted. She said, "Bet both legs, you coward."
What's that about?
Oh, don't worry. I thought it was funny. It's 11:46. 10 to 12 is the time. It is, I think, fair to say that we can break down some of these cohorts, confusion about who stays in that 20% vote for Tory. I liked Andrew. I liked what he said about immigration. So anybody getting in touch to suggest that he was a sort of undercover reform voter is doing him and themselves a grave disservice. But Nico is right in Appledore in Devon when he points out that you can never really win over people who've been convinced that those who have less than them are the problem. The reason why you don't have what you think you should have, or that you feel aggrieved about your slice of the pie, is the fault of people who've got even smaller slices of the pie. And that is something that I've always struggled to do and will always continue to struggle to do. Happily, most people got Karen's joke about both legs, although if you've got to explain it, it hasn't worked, has it? And then the private schools and the question of trust. But that's an odd one, especially when you push people on the question of why they would trust one politician over another, and they come out with lies, in the case of the first caller, that have been disseminated by profoundly morally corrupt Conservative politicians like Boris Johnson. And remember, every current Conservative was completely complicit in every single thing that Boris Johnson did. But on we go. Ron's in Maidstone. Ron, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. I'm expecting a beating up because last time I came on, I was, and you've got more resources at your disposal. I have more knowledge and more speed of thought than I've got at my age. But maybe I'm
just right.
I mean, no, come on.
No, it's just whatever it is. Before the conversation has even started, you're saying I'm going to get beaten up, but it's not because you're right. It's because you've got superpowers.
Do you want to end it there?
You rang me. Just to be clear, I didn't ring you. You rang me. But anyway, so you've already waved the white flag. We should probably hear what you've got to say.
Thank you.
You're
Okay,
welcome.
what would you like to know from me?
Well, it's a phone-in, mate. I've been asking a question for 52
Yeah,
minutes.
but I've not been listening for the whole thing. I've only tuned in the last 20 minutes, so I'd like to join in on that.
Oh,
so
okay.
what specifically would you like to ask me?
What did you have for tea last night?
What did I what?
What did you have for tea
last night?
Yeah, what did you have for tea last night?
Do you really want to know?
Yeah.
God, it relies on the bit of... I can do it. I had a chicken Caesar salad.
That's nice. Croutons?
Croutons.
Do you make your own dressing?
I didn't. I went to a pub to get it.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
What's your favourite biscuit?
Do you know what I really love?
No.
The chocolate fingers, and you bite off both of the ends and suck tea through it.
Lovely.
Mm.
And why are you voting Tory?
Well, I've only just decided to. I have done most of my life, but I've challenged my opinions in recent times.
Really?
Yeah, that's why I'd listen to your programme sometimes, because I like to hear the things that you say.
Okay.
I prefer the things that you say because you have a depth of knowledge and you're very eloquent. Some of the people that phone in, no, it's not kind, it's accurate. Some of the people that phone in...
It's kind and accurate.
Okay, it can be both. I'm not very convinced by many of the people you phone in. I quite liked your last caller, and I think he's expressing himself very well.
I did as well.
Yeah.
It's always a shame when people blame those who've got less than them for their own sort of piece of the pie. But on we go.
Yeah,
What are your reasons? I'm getting
not
asked.
gonna do that.
Alistair says, please kick this time waster off. I think that's unfair. I was the time waster by asking you about biscuits and Caesar salads. But tell me what it is about the Conservatives that fills your heart with enthusiasm, political enthusiasm.
No, it's less that than it's the oppositions. I don't trust any of the oppositions in terms of their competence or their values. Or their leadership, or their those things mainly.
You don't sound like someone who's been challenging their opinions and recently arriving at support for the Conservative Party. What are the values that Keir Starmer holds that you don't like?
Well, yeah, I think he sort of
values. Remember, that's the word we're looking for.
Okay. Well, I think he's got. Okay, fine. I don't think necessarily his values are any worse than.
Well, why do you bring him up then?
I apologise for that.
Okay.
But I don't think. I think. No, shut up. I think he sways according to. I think he's driven mainly by his. He wants to get into power.
Yes.
And he wants his party to get into power.
Remember,
and
enthusiasm.
Can I speak for a minute before you butting in?
No, Ron. This anger, mate. You've really got to sort it out. Okay,
no,
it's bad for you and it's bad for the people that you live with. Just get a grip and start being a little bit more polite and civilised. I'm conducting a phone-in which you have rung into. And the question that I'm asking is, why do you like the Tories? I don't want you to say things about Keir Starmer that you then have to abandon because you're devoid of evidence. I'm going to give you one more chance to conduct a civilised conversation among adults, and you're going to tell me what it is about Rishi Sunak's leadership of the Conservative Party that enthuses you.
That's the question, is it? Okay.
It's been a question since 11 o'clock this morning, champ.
I'm sorry I haven't listened to all your programme.
Yes, but now you know what the question is, and it's not fair on all the people waiting to speak that you continue to clog up my switchboard. So what is the enthusiasm, the basis for your enthusiasm towards Rishi Sunak?
It's not enthusiasm towards Rishi Sunak.
Well, that's the phone-in that we're having. Richard's in Newquay. What would you like to say?
Well, yes. I mean, I think that Rishi Sunak is probably hard done to.
Yes.
I don't actually think he's done anything wrong. He probably hasn't got the charisma and the ability to connect with the public when speaking that probably Keir Starmer has.
Really?
Yes.
Crikey.
I mean, Keir Starmer is a barrister.
I don't think he's very charismatic, though, is he?
Well, I wouldn't. Well, he can twist a conversation to get the outcome that he wants because he's good at doing that. Rishi Sunak.
I mean, I'm sort of disagreeing with everybody, which was bound to happen this hour. But I don't think he is very. I don't think he is very good at that, actually, Richard. But we all see. We all see what we see. We all see what we see.
But the point I'm trying to make is,
yes.
I think Rishi Sunak is a safe pair of hands. I mean, he did a good job as Chancellor. He got the country through COVID. Did a great job with the furlough scheme, and then the bounce back loans, which helped thousands and thousands of businesses.
He chose not to investigate all of the corruption, the sort of billions of pounds worth of corruption. And what could they have done differently, do you think?
Well, there's huge amounts that could have gone differently.
Like
and
what?
I think when
So what country would you point at as an example of getting it wrong?
Well, if you look at England, we have a population of 60 million.
No, I mean in terms
Wales
of what we did during COVID, the countries that did something differently and got it wrong.
I mean, I don't think this is about COVID, but I actually think we did a great job.
You brought COVID up. You literally said he's a safe pair of hands, and then to give me the proof, the first thing you mentioned was COVID. He got us through COVID, you said. So I'm wondering, who are you comparing us to? Where is the country that didn't do what he did? Because it was bleeding obvious that they were going to have to do furlough.
We performed better than Wales, which has a population of 3 million, and Scotland, that has a population of 5 million.
Perform better by what? By what
Scotland.
metric? What metric did we perform better than Wales and Scotland?
By numbers of deaths per capita.
Right.
And also, we got back to work a lot quicker, which has improved our economy.
People went back to work quicker in England than they did in Scotland.
Yeah, they did, because Scotland were pushing to have far more restrictions in place.
And that was a decision taken by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, was it?
I'm just trying to make the point how we got through COVID. But the real point that I'm trying to make is that we have to look at you are an economist, or you've got a background in
no, I don't. But never mind. You carry on.
Okay, fair enough. Well, when you look at the economy, we need. Our country is doing well. We are growing faster than the likes of Germany and Europe. Yeah. We've come through COVID. Yeah. We've gone through Brexit. We are growing.
So we want more of the same.
Well, when you look at what we do, we're growing. We're far ahead of our peers. So if you look at Wales, Labour is run by Wales.
Yeah.
The NHS.
But Wales is run by Labour.
By Labour. The waiting lists in Wales are worse than England.
Yeah.
We have a population in England of 60 million.
You keep saying that. I don't know what point you think you're making on that. But anyway, I mean, Rishi
Sunak.
I'm
trying to make is why would we trust Labour when they can't even run Wales?
Keir Starmer's not running Wales.
Labour are running Wales. It's the same people.
Well,
it's the same firm.
Boris Johnson was running England not long ago. Are you a fan of his?
Well, yeah, he's done a good job.
Boris Johnson.
When you look at the economy, we are growing ahead of where we should be. The NHS in England is better than Scotland and Wales. Okay. Education is outperforming Scotland and Wales.
Have you heard of Goldman Sachs?
Yes.
Have you heard of the International Monetary Fund?
Yes.
Have you heard of the Office of Budgetary Responsibility?
Yes.
Have you heard of the OECD?
Yeah, what's your point? I've heard of all of those.
Where are you getting the idea that we are outperforming?
Well, have you heard of UBS? If you look at UBS, their forecast for the UK is that we are growing faster than what France and Germany are.
That growth depends on where you were when the measure started, where the metric started. So if you've fallen further than everybody else and you start coming back, then your growth will be higher than them. But what is you? No, tell me more about UBS. What is UBS?
Oh, just that. Well, I haven't got it in front of me. Their figures.
No, but what is it? I'm not familiar with the acronym. I thought they did. Do you mean the investment bank, the American Investment Bank?
Yeah, they expect the UK to grow by 1.3%, and the Eurozone will be growing itself by 1.1%, while Germany is the laggard.
And that means you're going to vote Conservative?
Now, what I'm trying to say is we are doing well as a country.
Yeah, okay. I mean, we are outperforming everybody. We're doing brilliantly.
Well, we are, but
I know. I mean, it's just I'm reading a story about British children being the shortest, fattest, and sickest in developed countries, and I'm listening to someone tell me that everything's going brilliantly,
it's scary. People can make a story out of anything. When you look out there. If you look at it, inflation has come down. People's wages, wage inflation is outstripping inflation. Yeah. So that has been for the last 12, 18 months.
No, you look at... I kind of... Sometimes, what's the word that I'm looking for? I think you should have been doing Rishi Sunak's interview this morning with Nick Ferrari on it, because the country you describe, he doesn't recognise.
Yeah, but that's because he's not out in the real world. I travel up and down the country, the motorways are heaving.
Yes, the motorways are heaving.
Yeah, people are going on holidays. The airports are full. People that are unemployment are doing well.
Yeah.
There are plenty of jobs out there. If anybody needs more money, like the last caller said, they can go and get a job. I mean, when I was growing up, I used to go and get an evening job.
In St Albans at the moment, the average cost of a house is 17 times greater than the average yearly earnings of a person who lives there. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I'm not being funny, but I live in Cornwall and wages are high, but people are still able to...
But I just asked you a question.
House prices are high.
17 times greater than the average earnings of someone who lives there. So for whom is this economy working, do you think?
About people buying the houses there.
For whom is this economy working?
For people that are working.
Okay. So 18, they're all working, and the house that or rather the average house in their area is 17, 18. I kind of want a little bit of whatever it is you're on, to be honest, because it's beyond glass half full, and I have in a way enjoyed talking to you, Richard. Thank you. It's 2 minutes after 12. There's part of me now that is drawn to St Albans. I mean, what is it about St Albans that makes it such a desirable place to live? And how can you live there if the average house price is 17 times greater than the average yearly earnings? It's the least affordable place to live outside of central London. I don't know if we can get an hour out of St Albans, can we? Have we ever done an hour on one relatively small part of the country? The figures, quite a few people, we do it on by-election days, you're absolutely right, doing calculations to tell me what the difference is between income and house prices in Cornwall after Richard's contribution, but it's about 9 or 10 times more. So St Albans 17 times, nearly 18 times more. Shall we do it? Shall I just see who rings in, see if we just only get calls from St Albans? What is it about St Albans that is so desirable? And on a bigger economic question, how does it work? How does a city end up being full of properties that cost, on average, 17 times more than the average yearly earnings of the people who live there? I don't get it, all right? Look, I live in London. Not necessarily the sort of smartest part of London, but I know that the relationship between property and income can be fraught. But what is it about St Albans? I don't think I've ever even been there. Should we see if we can do? Should we get a hold? Do you think we will? The postman, where's that lovely text from the postie gone? And you've got no idea. This is from James, who's a postie up in Glasgow. You've got no idea how right you are. James has written, that hour must have drained you, James, that last hour. Mate, I'm shattered. I'm absolutely cream cracker. There was a sort of mental energy involved in keeping up with some of the somersaults and eccentricities, shall we say, in the last hour that makes me wish I'd done it at 12 so I could go home now. I'm completely pooped, which may be why I'm entertaining the very strange question of what it is about St Albans that makes it the most expensive place to live in the whole of the United Kingdom. 0345 600973 is the number you need if you're going to answer that question. Lots of text coming in on it. I don't think we're going to get enough calls to generate an entire hour. I live in St Albans. The council is absolutely fabulous. I can't read out the name of your MP, Susan, because there is an election on the way. It is perfect. Yes, but how can everybody afford to live there? St Albans has some nice pubs, says Simon. It has the oldest pub in England, says Alicia. I don't know where. It's got a lovely comic shop, says Damien, unlike Watford and Harrow. I don't know that you're necessarily taking this as seriously as I had hoped. And an hour on St Albans, I was expelled from St Albans High School for Girls, says Seema. I might have to switch off. Right, I'm going to take a couple of calls on this. Why is St Albans such a desirable place to live? And what's the economics of it? What does it mean when the average house price is 17 times the average income? Yeah, that's the question I'd ask you. What does it mean? What does it mean? Or how does it happen? How does it happen and what does it mean? All right? So I might take this up to 15:15, unless the quality of calls is off the charts, which frankly is unlikely. What does it mean when... Anyway, Fran's in Milton Keynes. I don't want to speak to someone in Milton Keynes.
Hello, sorry, I'm a first-time caller, so please be kind.
Well, it's a bit late now. I've just attacked you for being in Milton Keynes. What are you doing in Milton Keynes when St Albans is the place to be?
So I grew up in St Albans, born and raised, but excuse me, my 11-month-old in the background,
That's
by the
lovely.
way, you can hear him.
Beautiful sound. Hello. Hello.
And I grew up there, but me and my other half, we were priced out of the area because we couldn't afford to live there. But we would have loved to have lived there.
Why?
I've got a lot of friends. I've got a lot of friends and family live there. The schools there are really, really good. Really, really good. I love the park. The high street's really, really lovely. I don't know why it's better than everywhere else. It's just, but I think since the train connection makes it really.
All right, this may not work. This may not work. If you live in St Albans, and I want you to think carefully before you answer this question, who do you look down on? What are the areas that you? Where do you go? Oh, crikey, I wouldn't want to go there. Oh, it's gone. 11 minutes after 12. I had fears about this, but we shall press on. Lucy's in. Here we go. Lucy's in St Albans. What is so amazing about St Albans, Lucy?
Well, there's lots of things that you'd list, if you're looking to buy somewhere, like, good transport links.
But it's 17 times more than my income.
No, exactly. It really doesn't match up. Like, you can get these good qualities in plenty of places. Plenty of home counties, towns have links to the M25 and into London. I mean, there's loads of great things about it. I love it as a city, but it's definitely not worth the price tag.
And you're conscious of how expensive it is compared to, say, Harpenden?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I'm 26, and everyone I know roughly my age has not bought somewhere in St Albans. They've all had to move to Welwyn or Dunstable.
Like the last caller. So we can't quite pin it down. I read that it's because it does somehow combine London. You feel that you're sort of someone said to the BBC, it has a London vibe. But
the traffic is terrible.
No, they don't mean that. It's got a hustle and a bustle with lots of young people, but there'll be young people still living with their parents because you're going to have a sort of lost generation. As soon as you want to buy a home, you're going to have to move further afield.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, most people I know my age are still with their parents, so.
See, I've got a full switchboard now, Lucy, but I don't think there's an hour of material here, do you?
I don't think there is.
No.
I mean, honestly, St Albans is a nice place, but
that's it, really. But
everyone moans about how it's getting worse and worse on the Facebook group.
On the property prices getting worse and worse, or just the behaviour of people getting worse and worse?
Just what's good about the town. So people constantly moan about the market going downhill.
Yeah, but that's Facebook groups. Facebook groups are incredible. Residents' Facebook groups are incredible repositories.
All those Facebook groups are absolutely hilarious. Right. Someone once posted an avocado and said, "I found this on the hill."
I can beat that. Because we've got a lot of development going on where I am, and some people, some of the objections to it are perfectly understandable because it may get a bit St Albans-ified in the coming years as people who were born and brought up in the area get priced out of the property market. But there's a lot of development going on, and you'd have thought that some of the announcements of things that were coming to our town as a consequence of the development would be greeted with good news. For example, we've got a bookshop now, the Brentford bookshop. That's great. We didn't have a bookshop before. Do you know what someone on the residents group said in response to the news about the bookshop?
Go on.
Said, we've already got a bookshop. It's called the library. So I've become a bit of an addict to these sort of forums. Thank you, Lucy. I don't think I should probably have to apologise to Elaine and Matthew and Stephen. I don't think we'll be continuing this after the next junction. You never know. It depends entirely on the quality of Emma's call. Emma is in St Albans. Emma, it's all on you.
Oh, hello. I'm a first-time caller.
Oh,
the reason why I rang in,
yes.
I was sitting outside a school in St Albans to pick up my granddaughter, and
yes.
both my sons live in St Albans. And one of the reasons that they've moved here, apart from it being a really good place for children, to bring up a family, is that it has very good state schools. So a lot of people are drawn to come to St Albans.
But how can anyone afford to live there? I don't understand the economics of it,
my
Emma.
sons have lived here probably. One moved 2 years ago,
right.
And the other one's lived here for about 7 years. And one lives in quite what I would say, sort of quite expensive property. He
Yes.
has a job in London. He's a banker. And the other one's got a really good paid job. But he can't really afford to move at the moment. But they
Well, I tell you what, it's a good job.
want to
It's a
move
good job you're
somewhere
helping
else.
out with childcare, isn't it? Otherwise,
Well, it is.
yeah.
That is one of the things that's a really good thing that I can do that sort of thing, and other grandparents do the same. So, yeah, it is. It has a good vibe for families and lots of things going on for families.
Yeah, but you can say that about lots of places, but obviously St Albans reaches parts that other cities cannot reach.
Yeah, I think it does. And I think the school thing is very important. It's got very good secondary schools that have, that are outstanding, with lovely facilities and things like that.
I hear it. Well, you're not quite tempting me to move yet, but I'm mildly less confused about the appeal of St Albans. I'm having another one. Thank you, Emma, and you take care. What a moment to break your duck and ring the radio station for the first time. I'm having one of those moments where I think about an imaginary listener who has just tuned on that second and hears me say something really weird. But this is a whole conversation, isn't it? This is a whole 15 minutes where you tuned in at 12 o'clock thinking you were going to be listening to some hard-hitting political commentary from James O'Brexit. And what's happened to what's happened to the radio? Patrick says, can we do a phone-in on weird posts in local residents groups instead, please? No, I'm ending the St Albans phone-in now. Quite possibly never to return. In fact, the last two topics we've done, as things stand, I'm never going to do again. I'm never going to ask people to ring me again and tell me why they're voting Tory. That was one of the most unpleasant experiences of my entire life. Well, it was going all right until the end. The last two calls, I think, were challenging. And on the St Albans question, are you any the wiser about why St Albans is the most expensive place to live in England? It was your idea that we did this. You happy now? You got it? It's fine? No? After the break, we will discuss the vexed and increasingly febrile question of getting young people off social media. I don't mean the bans, I mean getting them off. And one way, perhaps, to look at this issue will be working out the difference that it made to your life when you realised as a grown-up that you were spending far too much time on there. It's 12:17. 90 minutes after 12 is the time. It's a funny one sometimes. I think you're joking. I hope you're joking. And you predict that if things carry on as they have, Keith says there'll be a string of ever more tetchy callers who haven't yet admitted that they spend too much time on social media. Let's hope not. But we were just talking there about London. And increasingly when you go out of London, if you live here, everybody thinks that we spend our lives being victims of crime. And you sort of think, where on earth does that idea come from? I think that knife crime has gone higher in Birmingham than it has in London now. And you sort of look at social media and you realise how someone living in Cornwall or someone living in, I don't know, Coventry has become convinced that you can't go out of the house. Did I not see someone posting about not wearing a watch or something like that? You can't go out of your house in London. It was Kevin Peterson, I think. I don't know whether he was being sarcastic or not. Social media is not the most nuanced place. So it occurred to me reading that message, that tweet, it occurred to me that you might not know the damage that social media has done to you. If you're spending your life, because it began as a bit of an anti-Sadiq Khan thing. So it was very hard to tell the difference between sort of base Islamophobia, pretending that because the mayor of London is a Muslim, crime rates in London have gone up, or crime rates in London have become unbearable. And now relatively sensible people who probably aren't even remotely Islamophobic have become persuaded that London is a kind of hotbed of criminality and corruption. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, well, it's kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about the increasing attempts. There's one very interesting article in one newspaper today, really challenging the idea that young people's lives are being absolutely wrecked by social media. I've read it, but I haven't read their work more broadly, so I don't think it would be appropriate for me to poo-poo it yet. I think most parents would, not even anecdotally, but evidentially, be very comfortable with the conclusion that social media or smartphones in particular can pose very real threats to a child's peace of mind, to a child's mental health, even if it's something as straightforward as the proliferation of apparently perfect female bodies and male bodies that you see on social media, causing all manner of problems for young people. Loneliness as well being a big issue. Vivek Murthy, the Surgeon General in America, has called for a warning label to be included on social media platforms, not just for young people. So similar to ones included on cigarettes and other tobacco products. The New York Times published a piece on Monday in which he argued that social media platforms have contributed to a mental health crisis among US youth But of course, most of the things that he points at apply equally to adults. Loneliness is like a hunger, he wrote, a signal that we're lacking something for survival. It is time to require a Surgeon General's warning label on social media platforms, stating that social media is associated with significant mental health harms for adolescents. And here's what I want you to help me with. I want you as a grown-up, or as an older person, because I can't take calls. A, you're supposed to be at school, and B, there won't be enough of you. There won't be enough 16, 17, 18-year-olds who have made a conscious decision to come off social media. If the Surgeon General of the United States of America is calling for a warning label to be put on TikTok and Instagram, Facebook and Twitter that looks a bit like the ones that we are used to seeing on tobacco products, then it is beholden upon all of us to shut up for a minute and pay attention. The US Surgeon General wants platforms that many of us use every day to carry health warnings. So what I want you to tell me is how you know he's right. And to do that, you need to have made the break, don't you? You need to be able to describe your life when you were on it a lot and compare it to your life now that you are off it a lot. So it doesn't have to be scorched earth. You don't have to have gone from full immersion to zero, but you need to describe a conscious effort to drastically reduce your social media usage and the consequences of that effort, what it has done to you. Because one of the bits missing from this conversation is adults having a fit of the vapours. We're all clutching our pearls, but we don't address our own behaviours. So we're all having conversations and heated debates about teenagers and the damage that it's doing to their mental health. But for everybody else, we're not really looking at our own problems at all. I told you some time ago that I caught myself once checking Twitter while reading, and this is going back a long time because they're doing A-levels and GCSEs, or they have been doing Oh yeah, you finished your exam, so you might be able to ring me. That I caught myself checking my Twitter over my daughter's head while I was reading her a bedtime story. And that was the point at which I took a very little decision, a simple, small decision, to leave my phone downstairs at bedtime. Just a little thing like that. And it meant that the levels of engagement at bedtime increased because I wasn't even thinking about the thing in my pocket. But I'm not good. I'm not good at this. There was a bit of research this week, and I know I was a bit kind of boasty about it. I didn't really understand it. But there was some research this week about the journalists who are most influential on social media. So I've been thinking about stepping back a little bit from Twitter because since Elon Musk bought it and people can pay for blue ticks and then appear much higher up in your replies than they would do otherwise, I have not found the experience as enjoyable as I have done in the past. But then, just as I'm thinking about stepping back from Twitter and maybe doing a Substack or something like that, Reuters published research into who the most influential influencers are on social media, and guess who flipping comes top in the United Kingdom? It's Muggins here. So I can't, in that context, turn around and step back from being the most mentioned individual news-related account in the country, whatever that means. So but what I mean by that is it's obviously good for business, isn't it? And I work in a commercial sector, so I don't know what it's doing to my mental health, but I don't think it's good in the great scheme of things. So what did you do? Oh, that's nice, Maz. That's a lovely thing to send in. I'm going to leave my phone downstairs at bedtime now, James. What a great idea. There you go. Changing lives one by one on LBC. So I want you to talk to me about the conscious decision. And remember, if you're younger than me, then you're probably on platforms different from the ones that I'm on. The conscious decision to turn down your social media usage and what effect that has had on you. Do you know that a majority of young people wish that TikTok didn't exist? Do you think a majority of heroin addicts wish that heroin did? Because you're thinking now that's odd, but it's not. I bet you that a majority of heroin addicts wish that heroin didn't exist. Don't you? I wish it didn't exist. I wish I'd never tried it. I wish it didn't exist so that I could never have tried it, and then I would not be spending my life enslaved to it in the way that I am. So when you hear that a majority of teenagers wish that TikTok didn't exist, your gut reaction is to go, pardon? But the more you think about it, the more sense it makes. Radio 4, who I wouldn't normally mention because they are our competition, but they do some fantastic documentaries, and they followed some children in a recent show, just over 5 days, where they had to give up their phone for 5 days. I can't quite remember whether they were replaced. Yeah, they must have been replaced with like a flip phone or a non-smartphone, so you could still be contacted and contact. But what was extraordinary about it was the diversity of reaction to the experience, but the almost unchallenged conclusion that less is more. Doing less is better. Spending less time on there is good for you, which means that the word addiction does apply. It does bring you into a habitual behaviour that you find really, really hard to give up. So you tried, and actually we should include people who have tried and failed. You've tried to give it up and you can't. So you are the addict that is under discussion here. So it doesn't have to be a completely revolutionary moment in your life. But obviously, the more profound the change you've noted since changing your habits, then the better it would be. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And Sam in Canterbury also joining the Leave My Phone Downstairs at Bedtime Club. Oh, that's my good deed for the day, isn't it? I did never cross my mind that might actually be helpful advice to younger parents of children younger than mine. But there is no downside to it at all. You just find yourself engaging more with your child at bedtime and actually spending a little bit more time with them as well, because you haven't got that kind of FOMO itch, that fear of missing out itch that social media can give you. So let's have a look at what happens when you knock it on the head. It's 12:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, and Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines. 12:32 is the time. Still texting, obviously, but an extraordinary number of people who have knocked it on the head. This is from Tim. I switched off 4 months ago, switched off X. I enjoyed Twitter during COVID, including your contributions, James. But as the platform matured under Musk, I found content to be darker and uglier, and I found myself being angry quite a lot of the time. When checking on it even in the middle of the night, I knew it was time to stop. Since I stopped, I found that my general attitude to politics and people has changed and become more positive. Do you remember, I think it's in my first book, do you remember the caller who was sort of full EDL, heading in a very EDL direction, and his wife told him to stay off his laptop? Not his smartphone, but we're going back 10 years or thereabouts. I always remember that call. Because of the clarity and simplicity of the contribution, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. And yet at the time, I don't think we'd clocked what those sort of interactions online could be doing to us. And he just said, my wife was getting cross with how angry I was. And she said, that's not you. I don't know what's happening to you, but whenever you're on that laptop, it makes it worse. So he said, I just put the laptop under the sofa for a week, James. And he said, within a week I was fine. I wish we were clipping calls back then. I think that was before the era of clipping calls, because there are some that I'd love to listen back to again. I got the transcript of it somewhere in my book, so it must be available. But that's the first example I can think of what Tim there is describing and what the rest of us may not even know that we are suffering from. 12:34 is the time. Lewis is in Skipton. Lewis, what would you like to say?
So I'm 24 years old and I've been off social media now for 2 months.
Gosh. Oh, wow.
And it's completely changed my life, to be honest with you.
You're a living experiment. Well, let's begin at the beginning. What made you think I need to make a change?
I've tried to kind of reduce my screen time for quite a while. So, I've set like app limits on my phone and stuff like that. Yeah. So maybe, I only allow myself for half an hour. But then, it's too easy to just kind of overcome that. So after trying for a while, I've just thought, you know what, I need to come off it.
But why? Why did you need to come up? What was it that you felt was unhealthy, or what was it that was happening that made you think, I don't want this anymore?
There's quite a few things, really.
Well, take your time.
You're spending you're spending too much time on it, first of all. So for me, it might be 6 hours a day, maybe.
And you're achieving nothing. You're getting nothing meaningful in return.
Exactly.
Except distraction. Just distraction. That's all it is.
Distraction and comparison to other people as well. So there's obviously all the different social media platforms, but on things like Instagram, it's just people posting the highlights of their life, and I think subconsciously you're just looking at what other people are doing and thinking, why isn't my life like that? So it's been absolutely massive, and just for things like just that constant state of comparison and just not knowing things is great. You know, like I can bump into people now, and beforehand I'd have known what they're doing on social media, but you can actually have a conversation with them and actually find out what they're doing in life.
Do you know the Surgeon General in America identified that as one of the downsides, one of the big problems, and I wasn't quite 100% sure what he meant, but you've just crystallised it entirely. It takes away the need for proper human interaction.
Exactly. I think for me, like, I'm 24 and I've kind of grown up since I was 12, 13, 14 on social media. So I think we are like the first kind of like generation who's just always really known this. It completely just, you forget, like, it kind of reduces your skills to actually socialise because you already know what's going on. You have nothing to talk about, but it's nice to actually just have these new things that you're finding out from people and just experiencing little things in life that, obviously on social media, the bar's really high all the time. Yeah.
You've expressed it beautifully. Do you spread the word? I mean, do any of your peers, your contemporaries, do they think you're daft, or do they envy you, or have you persuaded some other people to try it?
I think some people envy me. I mean, it's quite a strange one for me because I do actually work in kind of the media space, so coming off social media is a weird one. For my friends, I think and like my fiance and things like that, it's just so ingrained into what they're doing, and they don't actually recognise that it is a problem, and maybe it isn't for them, but
it was for you, and you knew it was, because it was making you unhappy. You talk about comparison and that idea that you will never feel fulfilled because you're constantly comparing yourself to entirely artificial images and entirely artificial lives.
Yeah, exactly. And for me as well, just another one. So I've been sober for like 18 months now. Just made the decision again to stop drinking and things like that.
Gosh.
And that, but coming off social media for this 2 months, I'd say has had more impact. You know, like that's been the better thing, like hands down. I always thought, I'll go sober and then that'll sort everything out. But coming off social media has just completely transformed just every part of my life.
Absolutely. Well done, mate. Seriously.
Thank you.
That's brilliant. Keep it up. That's a really superb, quite inspirational, I hope, for some people listening. And a remarkable comparison. I mean, the nature of the addiction, 6 or 7 hours a day that are just lost, wasted. But then on top of that, the ability to have meaningful conversations, proper interactions with other human beings, that's something that Vivek Murthy, the US Surgeon General, picked up on. And that's why he wants a proper warning on these platforms that will look and read like the kind of warnings we're used to seeing on tobacco and tobacco products and cigarettes. It is 12:38. Let's go to Thomas, who's in Bristol. Thomas, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello, James.
Hello, mate.
I'm a 38-year-old, and so I was there at the birth of social media.
Yes.
And I grew up. I remember being 9-10 years old with MySpace and then Facebook, and then finding my life being gripped every single day because I was so more interested of finding out what other people are doing in my life instead of people local to me, i.e. my close friends.
Well, it felt exciting. It felt like the world was growing in front of you, didn't it? The limits of the world were expanding in real time as you looked at the screen.
Yeah, no, 100%. And then we've had more social media platforms come out like Instagram, and then you get drawn into this artificial life. And we're fueling those artificial lives on Instagram because they're relying on people just to watch their reels and support what they're doing, which makes them create more content. And then you have TikTok, where I deleted TikTok 6 months ago because I was spending about 4 hours a day on TikTok, just scrolling just to fill my time. Because I'm a truck driver, so I spend a lot of time sat around.
Sure.
And I think there's so much things I could be doing better, like read a book, or and stuff like that. And it came to a point where I deleted it. I deleted Facebook like 4 years ago.
Was it just the theft of your time, or was it influencing you in an desirable and unpleasant way.
Well, it was much like the last caller said. It started to make me have negative opinions of more people around me.
Okay.
And my tolerance of other people just became non-acceptance, because I just wasn't interested in what other people had to say, and I looked at people in a negative view just because of the amount of exposure I'm having to this online world. And I thought, no, I need to get rid of it. And I deleted Facebook, deleted TikTok, and I pretty much deleted everything, just because there's so much more things, more positive things.
And how do you feel? How would you describe the improvements that it has made to your life?
Oh, 100%. You know, I no longer worry about anything that's not within my circle.
Yeah.
You know, I don't need to know what's happening to Joe in Kansas in America, and stuff like that. You know, I'm more interested in local politics, local events, and I find that out through friends.
I like that. Just one interesting thing, which it might sound like a gotcha, but it's not, I promise you. I'm just intrigued in what's happened to your memory, because MySpace wasn't founded until 2003, when you would have been 17. So you were actually older than you realised that when you first got into it.
It might have been. But I remember being in school, and when I was 16, maybe around about that time. So so my memory might have faded a bit there.
No, it's not. It's just a point to make about because that generational thing. So you were in a way, you got through your most formative years without it. Whereas now you're 12, you're 11, you're 12, you're there. So even your addiction, for want of a better word, is going to be an easier thing to deal with than if you'd got in there 4 or 5 years earlier.
Yeah, 100%.
Because we're not thinking about that.
A long time to remove that, because I'm like, what else am I going to fill my time with? But I found other things to do. But there is one positive aspect of social media, that if it wasn't for TikTok, I wouldn't have discovered LBC.
Well, that is huge. So be careful what you wish for. Be careful what you wish for, all you young people wishing that TikTok didn't exist. And we're very grateful for your time, Thomas. And of course, I'll tell you something I really noticed during lockdown, when I probably did spend more time on social media than I would do even normally, is I began to lose my enthusiasm for reading books. I've noticed this a few times when I've gone through particularly heavy periods of internet usage. The time investment, to sit down with a book for a nice hour or something like that. You after 5 minutes, you're thinking, I'll just check my phone, and that is another sort of little change to our brain chemistry that I can't think of any advantages that it might deliver. This is quite an interesting and a very honest one as well. I switched off 10 months ago, and now I'm only on LinkedIn. And in my case, it was due to the temptation for infidelity and flirtation, James. What's changed, fullest focus back to my family. We've also set limits for my 13-year-old daughter. And Robert said, I bet you're glad you changed the subject from St Albans, James. You're not wrong, Robert. Ross is in Glasgow. Ross, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I think I came off social media. I was trying to remember. I think it was 2021.
Why? Why did you do
it? I'm sort of in my late 40s, so I was part of Friends Reunited and Facebook
crikey.
and everything.
That was the first one, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah,
pretty much.
So.
Yeah.
I think so. And it was really, it was exciting. It was totally different. It was totally new. But it was actually the Shamima Begum case when all that happened.
Yeah.
And there was a debate going on one of my friend's profiles about how she shouldn't have her citizenship, and I made the point that if she'd been groomed by a paedophile, maybe they wouldn't have had that reaction. And I was attacked by 50-odd people I'd never heard of before, never mind interacted with. And I suddenly realised I saw the way it was going, and I came off.
I forget, because I do this kind of for a living, and you develop a thickness of skin that is not very common in the normal world. So I forget how disruptive that can be. It's shocking. There's nowhere else in life that you're going to have 50 people queuing up to call your names, and it just wouldn't happen anywhere else.
I was incredibly upset at the time.
I bet you were.
Actually, 2 or 3 years later, you made the same point on the radio, and I welled up and almost burst into tears because I was like, oh my God, I'm validated.
Good Lord.
But the thing is that, like your previous caller was saying, I have time, I can read books, I'm much more engaged in what's happening around me.
Yes.
But there's that nag at the back of my head that I'm missing out on something. Every TV program that you watch invites you to interact with them via X, via well, not so much Facebook, and then you were in contact with people from years ago in your life. You come off social media and all of that's gone. So there are folk out there that I would love to be in contact with, but I'm just not prepared to put myself back into that environment.
I mean, that they say all things in moderation, but it's very, very hard to provide moderation or to introduce moderation. That's such a compelling explanation. Thank you, Ross. And I'm glad that I was able to sort of help undo some of the damage that had been done to your peace of mind by those attacks. I thought it would mellow. That's how naive I am. I thought it would mellow over the years. I thought the novelty of being able to be publicly vile online in a way that you would never dream of being in person, I thought it would wear off. I thought the novelty would wear off, which shows what I know, doesn't it? Because, goodness me, people have not got bored or indeed got tired of saying and writing and posting things, often from anonymous accounts, of course, that they would never dream of saying in real life. I often think of the woman who died after being confronted with evidence of what she'd been posting about the McCann family, because that was our first really stark introduction to the gulf that would open up between the personality people were displaying online and the life they were leading offline. It was a horrible story, that, really grim. 12:47 is the time. 10 to 1. How does this work? The average food bill has gone up by how much since the last election? In the course of a year. So this is how much has it gone up by in the year since the last election, excluding alcohol. So what we spend weekly on food and non-alcoholic drinks. And then you obviously times that by 52 in order to get what the annual increase is. How much do you think it is? Just text me on this 84850 or WhatsApp 03456060973. And don't tell me if you know. Just tell me. Have a little think about your own outgoings, and see if you can put a number on how much you think your food bills have gone up by. Since 2019, and just see if we get close to the sweet spot, because obviously it's an average, so it's not as if everybody's going to send in the same number. And I want the figure, I want the pound sign, I want the amount of money that you think it has gone up by. 12:51 is the time. Back to social media. Anna is in Wimbledon. Anna, what would you like to say?
Hi. So I'm 16, and when I first started using TikTok, I was about 11 or 12.
Yeah.
So that's, a key development stage in my brain.
Yep.
And I definitely noticed after a few years, that TikTok was like negatively impacting almost every aspect of my life. Like
How?
my sleep.
Of course.
I would find it hard to sleep at night.
Yeah.
I found it harder to pay attention in class. I couldn't keep up with some of my hobbies because I couldn't focus, like reading. I have read for a long time of my life, and when I use social media, I find it harder to read. And I can't focus on the words on the page. And so after a while, I deleted it, and I've noticed my interactions with friends have gotten better and more genuine because I'm focused.
When did you knock it on the head? When did you?
I think first when I was about almost 15.
Okay.
And I've sort of been a bit on and off.
Yeah, of course. But because I'd have thought socially it's quite difficult, isn't it, to be completely removed because you don't know about stuff that's going on and things like that.
Exactly. I think with TikTok it's quite easy to be off that, but with Instagram where you actually interact with your friends, it's a bit harder.
Yes. And so what are you doing now? Nothing at all? Nothing on your phone at all?
Well, I don't have TikTok.
Wow.
I have a time limit on Instagram of half an hour. And
does that
I try
work?
not
Because
to use
it's quite easy to ignore that, isn't it? Or does it
Well,
work for you?
I had my parents set it up, so they.
Okay, so
I
they've
can't
got
do
the
it without
password.
asking them.
And did you ask them to set it up for you?
Yes.
So they didn't really realise until you went to them the effect that it
Well-
was having on you, or did they?
I think they did, and they definitely encouraged me deleting it because they did have an idea of how bad it was. But it's hard to
Articulate and pin it down,
Yeah.
isn't it? Final question. And how did your GCSEs go? That's not the final question. That's just me being curious. How did you get on with your GCSEs?
Great. I finished yesterday, actually. I'm
And
very
what
happy.
on earth are you doing listening to this old git on the radio on your first day in an exam-free 2024, Anna? I hope you're doing something a lot more exciting this afternoon. But do you, and you don't have to answer this question, it's a bit cheeky, do you think your parents have a healthy relationship with social media?
I think they do,
Oh,
definitely. My mum has always encouraged, or she's enforced handing in my phone at night, and for them, they also practice these rules.
They don't. Yeah, they practice what they preach.
So they've been very encouraging.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Have a cracking summer, and good luck on results day, Anna. I know it's been a really tough old time for everybody in the exam cohorts, the GCSEs and the A levels, and we can all breathe a mighty sigh of relief. My household became exam free approximately an hour ago, actually, or 25 minutes ago. David is in Southsea. David, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James. I've noticed from about 2019 that I was addicted to social media and just my phone in general, and just having it in my hand and scrolling. Back then, I was working a job that I hated. It brought me it basically felt like a failure to myself and my partner, who I'm thankful I'm still with. She called it out first, and it didn't go down well to begin with. Noticed the changes. Put my phone down. I just had to kind of put a lot of self-reliance on myself. So she noticed I wasn't doing any of my hobbies. I wasn't watching anything. I was not interested in anything.
What was your poison? What were the sites that had got you in their grip?
Instagram and YouTube.
Right.
Just watching, just rubbish on YouTube, basically. I'm a massive Formula One fan, and the way that I managed to start to get off Instagram is like Rishi Sunak. I don't have Sky.
Right.
So I could only watch the stuff on Channel 4, like the highlights.
Yeah.
And everything gets posted, like the winner and everything, on Instagram straight away. So it was every Sunday there's a race. I'm not picking up my phone, and it built up from that. I then started to rediscover hobbies that I love doing, cooking, climbing, and music were my 3 ones.
No, you reminded me of Steve Baker then. Did you hear that? Get me cooking, climbing, and what was the other one?
There's an extreme.
Yeah, what were yours? Because yours are nice. Yours are extreme catamaran, fast catamaran racing, parachuting. What were your 3? Yours are much nicer. I'd vote for you.
Cooking, music, and climbing.
Cooking, music, and climbing. There we go. What was Steve Baker? Oh, that's lovely.
I had no interest in playing music or listening to music, and then it relapsed all over COVID, obviously, because you're stuck inside. In the time I put my phone down, I got a better job. Still in the same company. I started my degree, which I'm just finishing my dissertation for now. So,
complete life changer. And you weren't you weren't suffering from some of the things that we associate probably with younger users, like comparisons or you were just losing time. You were just disappearing for hours.
Yeah. I've got a baby due next month, and it's now my mindset is more, and same with my watch. My partner is now my wife. Is the subject of how can we be a better
that's lovely
influence to our child. Basically, we are terrified of her growing up in a world that's completely dominated by social media, by smartphones, because we don't know what psychological damage
very much a work in progress
going to do.
No, but you're on the ball. You're going to be better equipped than I was 18 years ago, because we are aware of some of the dangers, and take that little bit of advice. I'm sure you don't need it given the journey that you've been on, but when the little one gets a little bit older, when it's bedtime story time, leave all phones downstairs when you go upstairs for bedtime. Although my friend Scott sends me messages sometimes that distract me from the important business in hand. Scott sent me a message. He said, I leave the kids downstairs and take the phone up. But he's very silly. That's almost it from me for another day. Apologies to John Joe and to Russ, Amy, and others. We will probably return to some of this territory another day. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, the official LBC app, where you can also pause and rewind live radio. So that's a healthy app. It's an app that lets you listen to the radio on your phone, and you can download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now I'm handing over a bit early. I need to fill another 17 seconds.
I've reduced my social media activity for the very reason your guest but last was saying. It was definitely fragmenting my brain.
Yeah, and do you notice an improvement?
Yeah, I have,
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
No mistakes today, Mr. O'Brien.
But now, coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Sawyer, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty. 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 Now it's time